Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm actually so excited to hear your full story myself because I know bits and pieces of it, but I've never actually heard you tell the full story. So I'm just going to give the floor over to you. Why don't you start and tell us your whole, because you grew up in a cult and then you ended up in another cult and now you are free from cults
Yes, I am.
and you ended up going to court.
Yes, I
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
So that's kind of unusual sometimes in these
hmm
kinds of situations. So yeah, lead us through it.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And secondly, I have not shared this story in a long time. So I'm actually really curious to even hear myself tell it and share it from this vantage point, because I feel like my perspective now, kind of looking back, I can see so clearly like the chain of events and how the cult mindset was instilled in me from so young and like carried through. So,
Wait, before you start, because you
hmm
just said that, and I know you had said to me earlier that like you don't feel you identify with the story anymore. How does the story now feel to you?
it almost feels like telling someone else's story in a weird way. And at the same time, it feels as if it's me telling a story of like a different lifetime of myself.
Hmm.
So it feels like very removed and yet still very much a part of um my life and what has made me who I am today, but it feels very separate at the same time. It's kind of confusing because it's very opposite and yet I don't know
Did
if
you
that
ever
makes
think that
sense.
you would be able to be in this place?
No,
Yeah.
not when I first left or not for many years. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us. Tell us.
Okay.
The people have.
So, sure. So, I was born into a family, second born of seven children, and we were a family. My earliest memories were always about church, and so my parents, they were not raised religious, but in college I think it was called Campus Crusade for Christ. It was like a Christian group on colleges, not necessarily super culty per se, but that's their entryway into religion. And I think my parents, that pendulum swing, right? I don't know, we see it everywhere. They grew up super not religious, and then they got into this in college. And then they started going to these conferences, and these conferences taught, and now come to find out later, they were all led by this one leader, this one man. And his name was Bill Gothard. There's been documentaries about him and about his organization. And so my parents got involved in that prior to my birth, actually. And that organization I now know is definitely a cult. And I put quotations because I feel like there's so much language and explanation we could make to cults, but basically, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, it definitely is a cult.
What's that documentary that's similar? The Happy
Happy,
People? Happy,
happy, shiny people
happy.
on Amazon. Yes. And if anyone, Amazon Prime, if anyone has seen 19 Kids and Counting, it's a TLC show of the Duggar family. They were kind of trending a while back. They have 19 kids. They were a part of that same organization.
Okay.
So, yeah, to give context of any listeners if that rings a bell, I grew up in that same organization. And so the ideologies that were passed down were very much as a woman, specifically, I want to make that distinction because it was a little different for my brothers than for me. But for as a woman, your whole purpose was to practice being a wife, submit to your father, and you were not allowed to go to college. You basically, the only career you were allowed to pursue was being what was called a homemaker. And I was basically trained from a young age how to be a homemaker, which is so interesting because now that's all I want to do. That's like another story. So it's kind of funny, but the only thing that makes it so culty is that everything was controlled and dictated. There wasn't really, you weren't taught, or I wasn't taught as a woman how to trust my intuition or listen to my own internal voice. I just was taught from as young as I could remember how to obey and follow directions. And that meant, wearing skirts, never wearing pants. That was like I have pretty core memories that don't trigger me now, but very vivid core memories of like, someone had given me a pair of leggings, I think at church, like hand-me-down clothes. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are so comfortable. I was like so excited about these leggings. I was maybe 9 years old. And I remember my dad was so mad that I came downstairs in pants. Like he like yelled at me. He told me to take them off. He like cut them up and threw them away. Like it was very dramatic, intense, like the core moment of like, it was very upsetting. And so, there were these really extreme beliefs that were instilled in me that I had to do what I was told. I didn't have a voice. I didn't have a choice in anything. And so when I growing and like I think I mentioned, I'm second of seven. So I was the oldest daughter. I had one older brother, and things were always different for my brother because he was a man. So he could like do a little bit more. He could go to community college. He could branch out more than I was allowed to. And so when I turned maybe 13 or 14, I really started questioning some of these things and was like, okay, but I don't think this makes sense. And I really kind of, as every young person probably does at that age, start rebelling of sorts of like, wait a second, like, I don't think this makes sense, and really asking my parents questions. And I think it's also important to note that I was homeschooled. So amidst all of this, part of that ideology was being homeschooled. And which is also funny, I'm actually a huge fan of homeschooling. If done correctly or done well. For us, it was not done that well, in that we were super sheltered. My mom didn't have the resources and support that she needed. Never mind the fact she was constantly birthing babies. There were seven of us, and
And I wonder if a lot of her time was taken up by the cult, like by the organization, like the teachings. Was that a thing for her?
I would say yes, in the sense of you had to go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. That's like three big chunks of time out of the week. You were expected to volunteer, cook meal. There was a lot to it. So
Yeah.
yes, I would say yes. Um, and also my mom, when she had my youngest sister, which was I was 10 years old, my youngest sister was born, and my mom almost died during the birth. Her veins had been stretched like so many times that she was pushing, and she had two veins burst, and she almost died. She lost like 2.5 liters of blood, and they almost lost the baby. They had emergency C-section. And so I remember being like 10 years old and my parents coming home from the hospital, and they were like distraught because another belief of this organization is that you do not use birth control for no reason. And my parents believed that having children was a blessing from God and you don't do anything to prevent children. And so they came home absolutely distraught that like they couldn't have more kids. And that spun my mom into a really severe postpartum depression. Not only was she physically sick, she wasn't getting any type of, like, I know so much about our bodies now. Like, she wasn't getting support with her hormones or with anything. And so another belief of this cult is not getting support even from professionals, or from whether it be mental health, or maybe you need some type of medication temporarily. And so my mom, bless her heart, she's an amazing woman, but she was so depressed because she was very chemically imbalanced. And so she was not able to be a mom. And so, like, my youngest sister thought I was her mom for like the first 4 years of her life.
Well,
Like, I called her my baby, and she thought I was the mom because I took care of her. And my mom was just not well. And my dad wasn't getting her the help she needed. And so it was a really hard childhood. Like,
wow. Wait, so could your mom not give birth again because of the veins? Like, could she have gotten pregnant again, or it was just too dangerous for her to do so?
she could have gotten pregnant again, but if she were to go through another pregnancy, her veins were so like stretched out. Like when you're pregnant, you have more extra blood, etc. And my mom genetically had varicose veins. And so they were very strained. And so the doctor was like, if you try to go through this process again and you go through the process of trying to give a natural birth, the active pushing might cause this again, and more than two veins might burst. You might have four or five, and we can't react quick enough.
So how does the cult navigate that? Because
So
then do you
that
stop having sex, or do you get, like, what if you get pregnant?
So basically, the answer of the cult would be that you trust God, you pray, and you continue having sex, and like, if God gives you a child, you trust God,
Okay.
and you don't have abortions, and you don't use condoms, like you don't do anything.
Okay.
And part of me is so grateful in the sense that we were, it's a little tricky to explain to people who aren't familiar with it, but we were the cult and the homeschooling and the childbirth and all this was kind of in one camp over here. And then the church that we physically attended in person 3 to 4 times a week was actually not connected to the cult, but they had similar ideologies. It was a Reformed Baptist church, if that means anything to anyone.
So
So it
you're
was a,
allowed to do that.
yes, you're
Why?
allowed to go to a different church if you want, because this ideology here, they didn't have physical churches everywhere. Do you know what
Got
I
it.
mean? Like they had
Yeah.
big conferences, big events, but you could attend a church that
Okay.
you wanted. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So I'm thankful in a sense that even though this church over here that I referenced where we were attending, it was by no means a great church. However, they did encourage my parents to like my dad ended up getting a vasectomy. Like
Okay.
they were like, it's okay to do that. Like it's not, So after, but it was for my parents though, it was very hard for them to make sense of it because they like believe this and now they're being told this. And us as kids, we were hearing a lot of this and I'm only 10, So I was basically, not basically, I was, cooking for 9 people, cleaning for 9 people. I was teaching my siblings how to read and write. Like I have vivid memories of teaching my younger siblings how to read and write. I was figuring out how to support my brother, who looking back, super neurodivergent, who as many people are, but I remember telling my mom, I figured out if I tell Luke, run outside in the field 5 times and come back inside, then he can focus on his reading.
What?
So I was like figuring all these things out.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I can't believe that your sister thought you were her mom even.
Yeah, she called me mom and then once she got old enough, I'm like, okay, I'm not your mommy. Like, and mind you, at the same time, we were all together all the time. Me and my 4 sisters shared a queen size bed. So I slept with them. I was, uh, even though
Four
we
of
had
you
4 of us in one bedroom, small bedroom.
in one bed,
Yes.
you said.
Mm-hmm. And so all this happens 10, 11, 12 years old. My mom is super depressed. I'm helping homeschool all my siblings. I'm making chore charts. I'm cooking. I'm making grocery lists.
Is your mom just in bed?
Basically, she was
Okay.
for like a couple years, she was like just not able to get up. I mean, she would go to the couch. She finally got on some antidepressant medication, which again was a big like deviation. My parents were probably like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And that helped some, but again, she was kind of put on a big cocktail of them. And and then they gave her Ambien for sleep medication. And so she'd pass out at like 10 p.m. And I remember going downstairs. My parents' bedroom was downstairs. I remember being like, I should go check on mom. And I would go down, and sometimes she would wake up and almost sleep eat. She'd be like sleepwalking and eating because she was hungry. And so there was just like I was basically taking care of my mom, taking care of all my siblings, and amidst all of this, my dad, who had alcoholism runs in our family for sure, and he had given up alcohol in college when he first like converted, and then he went through the whole cult, had all these kids, my mom had the baby, da 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 da, and now this other church that I mentioned that kind of where it was explaining to my parents like you can do the vasectomy, like they were basically trying in their own way, even though they weren't great at it, to help my parents realize not all of these things needed to be so extreme. So one
Yeah.
of the things my dad latched onto was like, oh, it's okay if I drink alcohol. So my dad then started drinking again, and he would get very angry. He's like an angry alcoholic, and so he would drink a lot. And looking back, I understand like he was trying to cope. I get that, but it was really hard for us kids.
Yeah.
Um, and we would constantly look to my mom of like, when is dad going to stop drinking? Like we would constantly ask her. We would even ask him ourselves like to stop drinking, and he wouldn't. So there was just a lot of those dynamics going on where I was basically the parent to my siblings and in a sense to my mom. So yeah, so moving on from there, I was determined to like graduate high school. And so I was amidst all of this trying to teach myself through textbooks, through curriculum, you
Why
know.
did you know that that was important? Like, why did you even have that feeling?
So I think I had that feeling because I know I mentioned that church, the Baptist church. We switched churches, and could we have to think to what year? Maybe like 14 or 15. We switched churches to a evangelical Christian church, which is we stuck out like a sore thumb, my family. Like everyone else, they looked normal. You know what I mean? They wore pants, they wore, my dad would consider immodest clothing, like at the time. Like they wore normal clothes. And so we switched churches. And I honestly think that helped in the sense that I saw other people my age or like realized like, okay, like they're graduating high school or oh, they're moving out. So I started seeing those things and started questioning, like, okay, well, I don't want to just live at home forever. So
Mhm.
I decided I was going to be a missionary to Africa because that's the other approved thing you can do as
Yeah.
a white Christian. So I became obsessed with like Uganda and Africa and figuring out like how
Why
could
do you
I.
think, do you know why this is? Like, why is the Africa obsession?
So I think a good question. I think it's in the Christian community, they come up with like these mission trips to go on. And Africa can be one that is often gone to do these mission trips. And they're typically like building churches or helping at an orphanage or things like that. And so I think what happens is someone who's super sheltered like myself maybe goes on an experience like that. I actually never got to go on one of those, but I'm just speaking from what I observed. I think it's because people will go on an experience like that and then have this huge like realization that like the world is way bigger than your little church and like there's other people in countries that need help, and so they get fixated on like that one place or group of people even though people
Need help
all
in.
over need help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my theory. But
Okay.
yeah. So for me, for why it was a thing for me was what I was allowed to do was basically train to be a wife,
Yeah.
or be a missionary. And so I was like, well, I want to move out of this fucking house. I don't even have my own bed. Like,
Yeah.
I'll be a missionary. So I was basically trying to figure out how can I graduate high school? How can I like create some type of path for myself? And the one thing that I had education around, like professionally, I guess you could say, was piano teaching. So I had a piano teacher that came to our house. We had a grand piano, and I learned piano from the age of 4.5, maybe, or 5, all the way through 18. And I was really good at it, which I don't know. I'm so funny. All my siblings talk. We're really good at everything. Like we all can cook, we all can garden, we can. So I probably sound so egotistical, but anyways, I was like, I feel like I would have been good at anything I was able to be taught. But
Okay.
that was the one thing that I like had a teacher for. So at maybe 15 years old, I was playing in church every Sunday. I was, so it that actually, interestingly enough, was a very pivotal thing because it taught me confidence. It taught me a lot of things. And I had other moms in our homeschool group asking me to teach their kids. So at 15 years old, I had my first paying piano student that came to my house and I taught them piano. And so I was like, ooh, maybe this is another loophole that I can like make. So I started teaching piano at like 16, 17 years old, 18 years old. And around this time, and mind you, we were at that more liberal church. I was not allowed to go to youth group. That was like, I've never been to youth group in my life. And as a Christian, if anyone's listening to this as Christian, typically when you're a teenager, there's such a thing as youth group. And all the young high school
Is this a
kids,
Catholic thing though? Or is it
no,
everything?
is what a Catholic
Is
thing.
youth group?
My understanding is youth group is kind of across the board, different evangelical churches or Episcopalian. I'm pretty sure
Oh,
most like
okay.
are congregational. Pretty sure most of Christian churches, regardless of denomination, have youth group activities for the young people.
Okay.
But we were not allowed to do that. Like my dad would give us the analogy of like, this is another like vivid core memory of like my dad would be like, okay, so if you're in a room full of people and you're standing on a chair, and he's basically saying, that we it was that was another thing I think interesting to point out here. Part of the cult was like you're superior to everyone. Like you know more,
You
you
always
know
are
more.
in a cult.
And so that was a big core like judgmental, and I think it's important to be judgmental now, but in that context it was so extreme. You were basically looking down on everyone. They were dressing too immodest, they were too this, they were too that. And so my dad would give us the analogy of like we need to be what was it? Oh, there was even like a whole song about it. Oh man. Anyways, there were all these analogies given, but basically
Wait, the cult had a song or your dad had a
the
song?
cult had a
What
song. It
is
was a
that?
song, it's gonna bug me now because it was about like being the only fish in the sea that was swimming one direction. There was many songs that we learned as little children that were um like having to do with these ideologies, right?
What's real? I mean, those things are so fascinating because those all start to form the way that your mind works and like makes connections and thinks about things.
Exactly. So you're getting this lens of the world from a very young age through songs, through church, through your parents, through all these things. And so it's just like compounding. So then you are now a teenager and you think you're just like better than everyone because like I'm wearing a modest skirt. Like, look at this girl. She's look at, that's your whole attitude basically.
Uh-huh.
And so youth group, these other peer activities were truly non-existent. And the few girls at my childhood church, actually that Baptist one before we transitioned, they knew each other way before me. So they were like, I was like this outsider. They were super mean to me. I never really had any friends. My first friend was a cousin of one of the girls from that church that lived in Denver, Colorado. She came to visit her cousins who were so mean to me. And I think they were mean to her too, quite possibly, but she gravitated to me and we became pen pals. That was my first friend at like 12 years old. And we would write letters. And
Wow.
my dad had to like read every letter and like make sure that we weren't like everything was super monitored. We
So you
finally
were
were,
friends when you were a little girl
no,
because you only spent time in the church and with your siblings and taking care of your siblings. And then even the people at your church, you weren't allowed to hang out with those kids because they
not
weren't at in like they weren't
they were in our
modest
same like
enough. They
cult
weren't.
kind
Yeah.
of.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. Okay.
yes.
Wow.
So I had, my siblings were my friends.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. I don't want to go on like too many rabbit trails, but I think it's very fascinating to note that my mom had two sisters. My mom was the middle child, older sister, younger sister. My mom's younger sister committed suicide before I was born. And my mom she's a different woman now, but from when I was young, she held so many regrets of being mean to her sister as a child. And she used to tell us as children, all I want is for you guys to be best friends. And
Yeah.
so it was like a lot of focus put on like what do you need other friends for? You have each other. Like you guys need to be good friends.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah. So basically, I don't really have did not have friends. I had this one friend. My dad would like monitor phone calls at one point. It was just everything was hyper helicopter parents to the max.
Mhm.
So, excuse me, my older brother was 2 years older than me. And so again, he had a little more leeway to kind of push back on things because he was a man. He had to become a provider. He had to get a family one day. Like, so he had more leeway than I did.
Mhm.
Excuse me. So I watched him branch out to like community college. He still lived at home, but he would tell me things about that. And it was still, not downplaying my brother's experience. It was still hard for him too because he then wanted to go to a 4-year college. And my parents, part of the cult is you do not have debt, no matter what kind it is, not even vehicles, not even houses. And so my parents would not support my brother getting student loans. So it was really hard for my brother to find. I think he found someone to maybe help co-sign. So he had his own journey, but he really had to fight to like get to college. So me seeing how hard it was for him, I was like, okay, is there some other way I can like I just wanted some type of independence. So now we're at the more liberal church and I spoke to the youth pastor and I remember they would always like ask us like, why don't your parents let you come to youth group? And they would even talk to our parents too, like, hey, why don't you let your kids come? And oh, I never finished that analogy. My dad's reasoning was if you're standing on a chair in a room and there's all these other kids and they're below you, what do you think is easier? For you to pull every single kid up onto the chair with you or for them to pull you down?
Wow, what a core vision.
Right?
Yeah,
As like an
okay.
11-year-old, you know what I mean? So it's like, so anyways, so I like loosely became friends a little bit with the youth pastor and his wife, and they were very sweet. And I remember talking to them one day, like, okay, I can't stand living in my parents' house anymore. Like, is it evil or wrong for me to move out? Because another core teaching was like, you do not, as a woman, you are not allowed to move out and be under from your parents' authority. And there was this whole umbrella of protection analogy that I was taught from such a young age that made it feel very scary. Like, oh my God, if I step out from under this umbrella of protection,
Mhm.
which was God and then the father of the house, or if you had a husband. So basically, if you stepped out from that, you would be exposed to Satan. Like it was a deep fear that was instilled in you. Like, and again, I saw these literal visuals, drawings, teachings from such a young age that I believed them.
Mhm.
So now as I'm getting older, I remember asking that youth pastor, like, is it a sin if I move out? Like, and he was like, no, there's nothing wrong with you moving out. Like, and I think it was hard for them to know what to do because we weren't even allowed to go to youth group, and yet we would try to talk to that, like, etc. Um, so then I got sent to a finishing school, which was a 2-month program through the Colts, not the church, the Colts. Okay? It was in Dallas, Texas, and it was for girls only. You had to wear navy blue skirts down to your ankles, white button-up blouses, and every single day you were in class all day long, and we were taught things like cooking, cleaning, sewing. We learned how to make tapestry, vests. We had to memorize scripture verses every day. They gave us laminated cards with scripture verses that you would stick on the wall while you're in the shower, so you were not wasting time showering and you were memorizing scripture.
Wow.
If you did not quote your scripture, you would get what was called a project, which meant you couldn't go on the daily walk outside, and you had to like write down the verses you didn't memorize like 100 times, or like, whatever.
Were you
So,
happy to go to
oh,
finishing
I could
school?
not wait to go because it was the
Okay.
first thing I got to, like, I was 16. I think I may have, maybe I mentioned the age 18, but this was actually 16. So
Yeah.
16 is when I've never been to high school, I've never been anywhere, and I'm
Yeah.
getting flown across the country by myself
Hmm.
to Dallas, Texas, to this hotel that the cult owned. So an entire antique hotel that the cult owned that was used for events, and this was called Excel, and it was 2 months long, and there was no cell phones, mind you. You had a calling card, and you could call your family once a week for like 10 minutes. So I went to that, couldn't wait to go because I was a mom. I was so tired. I was so exhausted
Yeah.
and I wanted to do something. So I couldn't wait to go. I was thrilled. So we're learning, all these scripture verses and Bible things and all that stuff. So, and we were forced to fast on Sunday. So it was just, okay, my whole life is basically a cult. You know, that's all I knew, is doing what you're told.
Oh,
So I was there for 2 months. I graduated Excel. And my roommate was a girl from California, and she was probably not probably, she was basically like my second friend. And she was great. And so that was my only consolation because all the other girls were not nice, but she was. So we became friends, and I moved back home, and I'll never forget when I came back home, I had my own bed for the first time. I was like 16 and a half, and I had a twin size bed, and then my parents had gotten like these other bunk beds or something for the other girls. So I had like my own bed. I was like a big deal. So
even did you like
around this same time,
did you sleep well in a bed with your three sisters? Or was it
you
just
should see
like
the picture.
was it normal enough that it was what it was? Or like what was that experience?
I think once I got older, especially that was part of why I couldn't wait to go to Excel, because I would be able to sleep better. Because as I was getting older to be 16, they were also getting older. And I have
Yeah.
pictures my parents have snapped with like my sister's feet. I'm like trying to sleep and their legs are on me. Like, so no, I was not sleeping well.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's part of why I couldn't wait to go to Excel, and also couldn't wait when I had my own bed finally. Yeah. So I came back home, and then I started getting involved in a lot of mission work. And again, I kept trying to figure out what could I do, like outside the home, that fit within these parameters, because I still believed what I had been taught to a huge degree still, even at that age. Even though I was questioning things, I still was afraid to like go outside of the rules.
But you were at the same time now starting to see a bit more of the world, right? Because you flew to
To a
Texas
degree, right.
to a degree. But so are you in your mind when you see other people, like in the airport or something, are you just looking down on them? Or are you curious?
I would say super curious, and like yeah, like super curious. Part of me still looking down for sure, of like, oh wow, these people are, dressed so immodestly. That was a big thing. Like they're so
Really?
immodest. Um, so yeah, it was a mix. I would say maybe like 30% super judgmental, but probably more like 70% curious. So I think it was a swinging from like so much judgment to now more like, how are other people doing things?
Okay.
Yeah. And and I forget the exact link when I came back from Excel, because I was 16. And then I want to say around age 17, we became aware of this large organization. There's so many Christian organizations, but another one called Child Evangelism Fellowship, CEF. And they did summer camps, kind of like vacation Bible school. I don't know if these terms mean anything to you, but like after school, like Bible clubs for kids. And that somehow, again, because it was involved in mission work, I was like allowed to do that. And that was a big piece of me actually socializing with more people my age because it was under the umbrella of like my dad, the religion, the Bible clubs, and yet it was a bunch of teenagers. I was the only one homeschooled though. The rest of them went to a Christian high school. Actually, I'm incorrect. A couple of them were homeschooled. So it was a mix. You
Yeah.
know, so it was I was starting to see other people that were also Christian. Some of them wore jeans, which was like, oh, which is so funny. But like it was like a shock factor and also like, okay, so that really compounded the questioning of like, okay, so they're also teaching the Bible, but they're wearing pants or they're wearing, you know. And so that's really when the speeding up of me questioning things really took off. And that's where I started to really kind of push back on certain things. Um, and around that same time, my dad allowed me to go back to that hotel in Texas to do a photography class. It was a 4-week photography class. And I was like, ooh, another loophole. Like there were these like little things that like women were allowed to do, but under very specific rules.
Mhm.
And so I went to back to Texas, and that was again that branching out of like it wasn't as strict as the girls finishing school. There were some guys there. It was very like, oh what's happening?
Yeah.
You know, I was like 17 and I was there for a few weeks and I learned photography. And I had saved up my own money from my piano teaching to like pay for this. So, which was not a small thing. I bought a good camera, etc. So now coming back home,
Wait, where did you grow up? What state were you
yeah,
in?
in
In
Connecticut.
Connecticut. Okay.
Yes. So New England, Connecticut, in the US. So, and that's where I lived my whole life, you know, childhood, etc. So, at that point, I started focusing on growing my piano business and my photography. Honestly, I didn't feel pulled to like going to college. I think looking back, it was probably because it looked so hard for my brother to do it that I was like, how could I ever manage that? Like, it just seemed too like much. And so I also felt like, how could I leave my siblings in a sense because
Yeah.
I was helping with them a lot. Now, mind you, thankfully at this point my mom was doing much better. Um, so it wasn't as bad as those like year 10 through 15, you know? So now it was a little bit better, but I'm still going to church, I'm still doing the Bible evangelism, and I'm teaching piano. So then I start getting really frustrated with my parents' church. I'm not liking it. I'm starting to question things. And so one of my close friends through the evangelism of kids group was like, "Oh my gosh, Danielle, I met these pastors from this church that's right down the street from where you live. They seemed so cool. They seemed so nice. We should check it out." And I was like, "Hell yeah, I want to find my own church." That was my way of rebelling, was like finding a different church. And so um and at this point, I did have my driver's license, so my dad did not let us get our permit at 16. He said it was cheaper to wait till you were 18. But he did teach us how to drive, so I knew how to drive at this point.
Was
And I
that
did.
true that it was cheaper, or was that just his
So
excuse?
apparently, yes, it was cheaper because you didn't have to pay to get a permit if you were 18. You could just take the
Ah,
class. So
okay.
it was basically avoid like in his mind, I have 7 of these kids. This permit fee is going to add up. My dad is like a German, very
Fair.
so yeah. So but he taught me how to drive in we had a 16 passenger van. Like that's what I learned how to drive in. He said I had to learn how to parallel park in Boston and New York before he would let me go for my driving test. And it's like
Wow.
so random that I was like so sheltered, and yet I have these other like interesting, weird experiences that like I knew how to do a lot of shit at the same time. It's very hard
Yeah.
to explain.
Uh-huh.
So like I knew how to drive, and so yeah, so I'm 18. I know how to drive at this point. I've had like some experiences, and I'm like I want to find a church that I want to go to. And so, interestingly enough, my dad actually came with me the first time I went to visit this church because I told my dad I'm going to check out a new church, and he wanted to come. So I was like, fine, he can come. And we get there. It's a very small church, truly maybe even the size of the small bedroom I'm in. It was a small like rented space with a little pulpit at the front, a piano, and it was a woman pastor who started the service. And I was like, hell yeah, there's a woman pastor. Is this legit? Like, is this a thing? And so I was so excited to see like a woman up there talking, and she was dressed nice and she had like style and whatever. And so come to find out, it was the husband and wife. They were both pastors, And my dad was basically, and I didn't note this, but a big thing of the cult is women do not speak in church. Women are to be seen, not heard. There are Bible verses that they would back this up with. And so that was a huge no-no. And so for me, again, I'm a teenager. I'm trying to rebel. I'm like, well, I'm going to that church. And so my parents were not happy about it because it had a woman pastor. Well, I'm like, so I start like looking at Bible verses and trying to prove to them like there's nothing wrong with this, da da da. So that just pushed me into it further, into going to that church. And so I started going, and I was 20, I was 20 years old at this point. And with my lack of socialization and emotional, like a maturity level, I kind of feel like I was probably like 14
Yeah.
mentally and emotionally because I had been so sheltered. It's not that I had no experiences, but like I had never kissed anyone, I had never dated anyone, I had never had sex with anyone. Like I was
You barely had
very,
any friends even.
yeah. I
Okay.
basically had, like I mentioned, that evangelism group, that was the most friends I kind of started to have. And one of them is the one that kind of introduced me to this.
Right.
So her and I both started going to this church. So we start going, and I was still living at home at this point, and I like loved them. I was 20, they were 30, so they were 10 years older than me. They were so nice. They, they would hang out with us afterwards, and they were so curious about our lives. When I say ours, I mean me and my best friend. We
Did
both
other
went.
people go to this church?
So his parents went, and they had a guy in the back who did the sound. Come to find out, he's their cousin through marriage.
Okay.
So, and then like two other people. So basically their family and like two other people,
Okay.
which should be a big red flag.
Yeah. Like you didn't know that. To you, that's
I
not a
didn't know
flag
at
at all. That's
first.
kind of
So,
normal.
right, because there are so many different sizes and types of churches. And even in that culty group, they would talk about how churches used to meet in homes back in Bible day. Like there were all different sizes. And so I had been to different sizes of churches. So in all of that context, it didn't seem like a red flag to me. Oh, this is 7 or 8 people. They're cool. Like it didn't sound an alarm to me.
Yeah.
So I started going, and they really took they really just kind of took me and my friend in that sense of just getting to know us, giving us a lot of attention. And they started, asking questions of like, oh, so like about our family, my family, etc. At the same time, I'm feeling frustrated. I want to figure out a way to move out. I don't, and so I go to them. They're my new pastors. I'm like, hey, is this wrong if I move out? And they're like, oh my gosh, no. Like, so they're explaining to me with Bible verses, like explaining there's nothing wrong with me moving out. So they start to really be this support that my parents weren't. And
Yeah.
so they took me under their wing of helping me find an apartment, helping me find a car. And at this point, for context, I had grown my piano business to like 25 piano clients every single week. And I honestly, when I think back of this, I'm very impressed because I was 20 years old. I made enough money on my own to get my own apartment in one of the most expensive states in the US,
Wow.
Connecticut. And like no one handed me shit. You know what I mean?
Isn't
Like
that amazing? That's like, I think that that's just an innate part of you, like that sort of determination and dedication. Wow.
so I took what I had and I did this piano thing, and now I had the pastors kind of validating and helping me figure out how to get a car, how to get an apartment. And at the same time, they're, preaching messages every single day. And this is the New Cults. So the New Cults was this church, and their ideologies followed word of faith, which is basically, some people may refer to it as like health and wealth prosperity gospel. What you say is like, if you have enough faith, it's going to happen. So like your words are dictating your life, and you have say over life. You should never confess that you're sick. Even if you are sick, you need to say that you're well.
This is almost to me like a blend of new agey things
Yes.
with Christianity. right?
Correct. That's a great way to put it.
Is it? I mean, is
It
that,
is actually. Yes, because a lot of it is like, New Age is very like your affirmations and your what
yeah.
you're saying and if and your vibration affecting your reality, whereas this is the Christian version of very similar principles.
Where does it come from? Is it theirs?
It comes
Or-
from, no, so it comes from Kenneth Copeland and Word of Faith Ministries, which is
Ah,
a mega like or like Joel Osteen, Kenneth Copeland, Jesse Duplantis, all these they're like mega churches with
okay.
they own jets and helicopters and they're
Yeah,
billionaires. Yeah.
you
So
would. Okay,
they yeah.
wait. So
Yes.
pause. I want to
Yes.
know before you continue, what is your actual relationship like with God at this time?
Mhm.
Like through your childhood and then now, like what is God to you? Do you really believe in God? Are you scared of God? Do you feel this? Like what is it?
Yeah, so like present day.
No, because we'll get to that later, but like
Yes, yeah.
but in your childhood and then when
Mhm.
you joined the new cult, how are you thinking about God?
So in my childhood, I remember like vividly when I like got saved. I was like 4 years old. That was the language that was used. And I like said this prayer with my dad. And it was basically like Jesus like made me clean. And I was like, Jesus lived in my heart. Like this was some of the language that was used. And so, I mean, I felt happy about it because that was like what I was told was like good. You know what I mean?
So
So,
you
and I
get
remember,
got saved by saying the prayer?
yes.
Okay.
So basically, by asking Jesus into your heart and confessing that you're a sinner and you need Jesus, that was how you got saved. And then you would go to heaven when you died. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the way it was taught to me when I was little. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, when I was 4, I said this prayer with my dad, which, yeah. And I remember it's actually so funny. I'm talking to you right here because I remember being in this room and looking out this window right over here. And I remember seeing this colorful rainbow, not the day that I prayed the prayer, but I was young. It was like this colorful rainbow and there were these two like white angels and I could see them in the sky. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like maybe that's where you go to heaven." But I can still see it. Like I could vividly see like this little like colorful rainbow and these white angels. And so I remember being very like in tune with things that I could maybe see or sense from a very young age. Um and I mean, I feel like I don't want to say neutral about God, but I mean, I felt fine about it as a child, And then as I started getting older to the teenage years and towards trying to get away from my parents, I think I more felt confused of like, okay, this group is saying this, this is like, it felt so confusing. And something else to note is we had no TV growing up. So I had no movies, not allowed to listen to music. Um, so I had no like I yelled at for like tapping my foot to like the music in the store one day or something. Like there was no dancing. Like it was very restrictive. So now I started to feel confused and I started to feel frustrated because I think it was at the Baptist church actually it was 9/11. So however old I was at 9/11, we had a tiny TV that we pulled out of the closet. We saw 9/11 happen
Oh my
and then
God. Like the only thing you were allowed
all
to.
the things. Like I literally remember seeing the second planes hit and we had no TV, like ever. It's actually so funny. Anyways, so from that point, for whatever reason, the TV stayed out, and we slowly were able to watch like certain movies under very specific like rules. And so I remember my friends at church that they were so mean to me, but the church people were all obsessed with Lord of the Rings. I wanted to watch Lord of the Rings because I was hearing about it. And I remember my dad was just like, no. And I'm like, why? And he couldn't tell me why. And that made me so frustrated because I'm like, why can't you tell me why? You're telling me I can't do this. You're telling me it's wrong. And you literally cannot tell me why. This is bullshit. Like, I was so annoyed. So that's when I started to feel confused and annoyed and frustrated, not necessarily directly at God, but like, okay, like what is what? Like this is so confusing and my parents are not being helpful. And when I try to ask them questions or say like, okay, why can't we date? Like I remember as a teenager they gave me this book called I Kissed Dating Goodbye by Josh Harris. I don't know if it rings a bell to you, but in the Christian community it was a huge deal. All teenagers were like being forced to read this book. You were not allowed to date. You were only allowed to have what's called a courtship, which is where it's like very serious from day one. Like you were not allowed to date. And so like I was given that book, but if I questioned anything, I was basically just told like, I'm your authority, submit. Like, why are you asking me anything?
Mhm.
And so the fact that these new pastors were actually letting me ask them questions and they were actually sitting down to answer them and explain them to me made me like them and trust them.
When you sit down to pray, are you praying, like, are you still feeling a connection with God when you're praying at this point? Because you still went to another church, so you're like
Hmm.
interested in the beliefs to some extent, right? Not only because it's the only thing you're allowed to do.
I think it was a lot of fear behind it of a big part of me still kind of believed in this umbrella thing. And so I was like, okay, well, I need to go to church somewhere or I'm going to be totally exposed. So I
Got
think
it.
it was truly like a fear, like if I'm not at church somewhere, what might happen to me? So
Okay.
it
So
was
you
more of
see
like
why your new umbrella.
right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then I just really gravitated to them and I was like, great. And it was like they were validating what I wanted to hear. And
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, they really did help me find my own voice or find my independence, help me get a vehicle, not financially, but just advice wise. I did it all myself, but they were, and so in the beginning, that was amazing
You had an
and
apartment,
very,
you had a
so I
booth.
got my own apartment. Yeah, I moved out and like things like, and my dad has since like profusely apologized to me for this, but like my dad refused to help me move. And the new pastor helped me move. Like he came with his truck and helped me move. My
Mm-hmm.
dad wouldn't even help me move. And so because they didn't approve of basically my decision, like I was stepping outside of the rules. And so I now had my own car, I had my own apartment. I was going to that church, I was teaching piano, and I would say for like maybe 1 year, I was going to the gym. It was great. Like it's still, obviously looking back, I realized what that first year was. Honestly, the first maybe year and a half, 2 years was I was being groomed by these pastors. And so they were slowly encroaching in on all these different areas of my life. And so they gained my trust first.
Wow, they took a year and a half.
Oh, it was very long and slow. It was,
Wow.
mm-hmm. And so nothing bad had happened at all at this point. um, bad, meaning things that ended up happening later on. So, they slowly started then infiltrating into like making me question, like for like I'll give an example. Like I go to church and I go to service and afterwards so like, oh, like what do what would you do this week or whatever. And if I would mention like anything with my family, they would be like, oh, well, I thought your parents didn't support your decisions. Like, so why, what, so like, what's making you go over there? Like, they would start like planting these seeds of like, why are you hanging out with your family still? And so again, it was very slow. This did not happen overnight, but they slowly started making me question where I'm spending my time and my energy. And they would use all these Bible verses. So they would reference how Jesus talked about in the Bible, like when Jesus was dying on the cross, um, someone said to him, "Look, your mother and your brother are mother and your sis, no, your mother and your father are right here. Why won't you talk to them?" And he was like, "My mother and my brothers are those who have followed my teachings," or something like that. Like he was basically saying his spiritual family was more important than like his biological family. Like basically it doesn't matter who your biological family is, it's the people that are really like with you. That was like the essence of this message. And so they took that as like this proof of we are your spiritual parents, we are your spiritual family. Your biological family is not supporting you and they're not respecting us, the designated men and women of God. And so for your protection, you should not associate with them. So it was like a major twisting of a lot of things to try to slowly get me away from my family.
Yeah.
It was very gradual. Yeah. So then um they had a home daycare with a whole bunch of little children that they ran. And they knew I had a lot of childcare experience. And they also knew that I had some medical debt that I was trying to pay off and I was really overwhelmed with. And so they sat me down and they were like, we have an idea. We'll pay all these bills for you. and then you can pay us back by working at the home daycare for
Oh
$10 an
no.
hour.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my God, that would be amazing because I was so stressed out with all these bills.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was, I don't remember the exact amount. I'm sure I've either said it or written down, but it was maybe like $3,000. It wasn't huge, but like it was significant enough. It was a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so I then started working for them at the daycare. So then they were like, well, we need a personal assistant. They had 3 people going to their church. Like they did not need a personal assistant.
Yeah.
So they kept coming up with reasons of why I was so amazing. I did such a great job, which I am so amazing. And and so they're like,
You did such a great job.
so they're like, we need a personal assistant. So now I was getting not only this attention, validation, like I was important, I was needed, like it was checking all these boxes, and financially it was making sense. And so I started working for them. So I would be at their house and I would work for a certain amount of hours, and then they'd be like, okay, work's done. Oh my gosh, we'll take you out to dinner. So then we'd go out to dinner. We would go to the movies. Like they would take me all these, places or experiences that I never got to do. We never went out to eat as kids. And so I was 21 probably at this point. Yeah, 21.
Is your
And
friend still going to the church or no, she's moved on?
oh no, she's moved on.
Okay.
So yeah, so she was still going, and then her boyfriend, which they were courting, also started coming to the church. So they, so yeah, they were still going to the church. So anyways, all this kind of morphs into me being around them so much. Like I'm working for them with the church. I'm with them at service. I'm doing daycare, and but I'm still teaching piano. So it's like I'm like all over the place doing like a million things. And so mind you, they kept validating how much my life had improved since meeting them. Like, you have your own place now, you have your own car now, your life is so much better. And a lot of the things that they taught me in some ways, it's some, I'm not trying to get off topic, but like sometimes people will throw the baby out with the bathwater. So it's very interesting to me because I've somehow been able to decipher the fact that like truth is truth no matter where you heard it from.
Mhm.
And it's very interesting because there are certain things that I definitely like maybe learned from them first,
Yeah.
but they're just like either laws of the universe or life or how this reality is wired that is just how it is. And so clearly those things were working, and yet all of the credit was going to them.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a very long, gradual grooming process. So then I started doing workout classes with them. And one of the first like weird conversations was like, oh, we wanted to sit down with you because the other day when we were working out, we thought maybe you felt uncomfortable and you kept like pulling your pants up, and we just wanted to say like you don't have to feel uncomfortable. He's never looking at you weird. We're all just working out. So we wanted to like sit down and make sure you do feel uncomfortable. And I was like, I hadn't noticed anything. I was like, I'm fine. Like, okay, like, and looking back, that was one of the first like weird conversations that happened.
Hmm.
And so all these lines kind of kept getting blurred in the sense of like we're working out together, we're just like doing everything together in a very weird way. And so the like they were going to go on a vacation to Florida, and I was going to oversee their house while they were gone. And mind you, this is around the time that like iPhones came out, I think. And so like it went from Blackberries to like iPhone. So now FaceTime was like starting to become a thing. It's just so fascinating because it doesn't feel that long ago, but it was long enough ago that like technology was not where it is now. So like tracking someone's location wasn't a thing. There were certain things that weren't in place yet.
Yeah.
And so they were going on this trip, and he had preached. It's just I can only imagine like how calculated all this shit was. He had done like a whole series about, abundance. And so for instance, how many pairs of underwear you own has to do with how rich your mindset is. So like if you only have a few pairs of underwear, so like basically everyone was given an assignment to like take an inventory of your underwear, like go buy more underwear if you didn't have enough pairs to last you like 3 weeks. So he goes on vacation with his wife, and he calls me and he's like, well, I'm checking in. Did you do your assignment yet? And I'm like, well, yeah, I went to Kohl's and I got underwear. He's like, well, what kind did you get? And I'm like, oh, I'm like, this seemed like a weird question. And I'm like, I got the kind I always get. And he's like, well, you need to show me. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, it's not a weird question. It's just you went shopping. I need to see it. It's just so ridiculous even like saying this back. But that was like the one of the first weird things. And I remember thinking like, okay, and he's like, no, like you need to like try it on. He's like, it's nothing weird. I'm your spiritual dad. Like there's nothing weird about that. Like there's nothing sexual about it. So he goes on this whole tangent about how like this is not sexual unless you make it sexual. It's literally just underwear, show it to me, turn around, that's it.
Mhm.
So that then morphs into all these conversations around like who am I attracted to and who do I, who would I want to date and like have I had sex before and what do I know about sex and like have I ever had sex with like two people and would I ever want to have sex with them but it would just be for fun and it would just be, like I could just watch and they wouldn't do anything. And this is like a year and a half of grooming. So someone who may not understand how this works, it might seem confusing, but and it was confusing to me too because I'm like, okay, this sounds really weird and super off, but like he's the man of God, you're supposed to do whatever he says. So I was like scared to not do it.
But I can also put myself in your mind, sort of, and imagine just like, I think we always still have that tiny bit of us that's like aware, that's kind of like, this isn't quite right. But at the same time, it's overruled by so many different things. Because not only have you spent a year and a half with them, like these people mean all these different things to you, and you have your conditioning from your childhood, so like really you don't have much of a chance.
Yeah, all those factors combined, and you summed it up perfectly. Because I knew like this seems super weird, but then I'm like, okay, but they've done so much for me. They would never do anything to harm me. Like I kind of like rationalized it. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to, even when you talk about like the lack of friends or lack of support. They were like friends almost at that point. They were, even though I viewed them as my spiritual parents, we did so much together. So I'm like, oh, I don't want to like make them mad. Like, okay, maybe this is okay. Like, okay. And so, it started with showing the underwear. And then when they came back from the trip, just she came over. And it was like, oh, oh, I was just wondering, like, we're just girls. Like, what would you think if I like touched your breasts? Like, it was like all these like little stages of things of like slowly getting to this point where they're like, oh well, let's like plan a night and we'll like go to a hotel and but you can just watch and like nothing's gonna happen and like so it's just slowly morphed into this whole situation where I felt like actually I have a very interesting thing to say that I think this is very pivotal about the grooming when I was young. I was taught that you could not kiss anyone until you got married. So kissing someone was almost as major as your virginity. And so something that I didn't mention, but I had when I mentioned the fixation on Africa and Uganda, there was a group from Africa that had come to church, and there was a guy that I was obsessed with, and we basically were dating long distance from Africa. We would Skype. Skype was a thing, and so I remember telling him, I can't kiss you unless I'm marrying you. And we would hang out when he came to the States on these trips. And so I knew him for a couple years and we would Skype. And I was convinced, oh, he's my husband. He's who I'm going to marry because I like him. Because mind you, dating was not a thing. You either court and that's it. And so I remember with him, we were in a car and he ended up kissing me and I was so upset I literally started crying. I was like, why did you kiss me? I can't kiss someone unless I'm married. Like it was literally as major as if I had lost my virginity. So it was almost mentally as if like, well, who cares what happens now? That already happened, even though it's so minute. But it
Yeah.
was like such a strong programming that like you can't kiss someone until you're married. So since I had already done that, it was almost like, oh well, I guess it doesn't matter what I do now. And
Yeah.
that was basically kind of what I thought combined with everything else. And so then, we he ends up coming over, really rather violently, forcing me to have sex with him, forcing me to do things I did not want to do, like forcing me to swallow things I didn't want to swallow. Like it was very intense that I'm realizing now is like a form of rape because in the moment I didn't realize that's what was happening to me. And so it started from that to then transitioning to doing things with all three of us. And they basically would say, oh, well, the Bible says when you confess your sin, God forgets your sin as if it never happened. He casts it as far as the east is from the west, and he doesn't remember it. So if God doesn't remember it, then you shouldn't remember it either. So after we do this, we just pray, and God forgot about it, so we forgot about it because we're made in the image of God.
So they understand that they're sinning, but there's
Yep.
like a framing around it that it's also okay. And how do you think, like, do you believe that, or do
I
you?
mean, present day, no.
No, I know, but at the
Yeah,
time, you at the
at the
time.
time. At the time, it was like it's hard to explain the experience of almost feeling like not like you're a robot, but like kind of like you're going along with whatever they say. Because if you don't go along, you will be like ostracized. So it
Oh,
was
no.
like that fear of like, okay, these are, I was so isolated to only them that it was like, okay, I know I don't think this is right, but they're saying it is. I was like questioning it. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, okay, well, if this can be a fun, safe way to have sex and not get pregnant, and like, and basically they would also sell me on like, oh, well, you can have fun, and wouldn't you rather have fun with someone you trust and we're not going to hurt you than going and fucking a random person? So like they would say like all these things, and I'm like, oh well, I guess that's true. It's better than fucking a random dude on the street. Like I would just kind of like go along with it.
And at the time, did you find it fun? Like, did you think you were having fun?
So that is what's so interesting. The first few times it was like awful. Like I was bleeding. It was physically so horrible.
Yeah.
But as time went on, for sure there was times of having fun, but it was
Because you would
more
have pleasure in some
yes.
aspect, right?
Yes. Yes, for
Yeah,
sure. And that's what makes it confusing. And that's what
totally.
makes sexual manipulation confusing because your body is going to do what it does like biologically or physiologically, whatever the right word is, even if you don't want to do it at times. Just how sometimes it won't do it when you want it to. Our bodies are going to do certain things. And
Yeah.
so that's what makes it even more confusing because it's like, oh, I don't want to do this. And yet my body is like responding. So what does that mean?
Arousal
So it was,
non-concordance, they call it, I think.
sounds familiar. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yes, but then it more became about the fact that he then became obsessed with me and trying to have sex with me behind her back. And
Oh
so he
boy.
would like come over to my apartment at like 5 o'clock in the morning. He had a key to my apartment. He would just be like, come inside. And so it became, and then that turned into me a whole like, oh, well, I am on like a power trip that like he wants me more than her and she doesn't know about it. So it
Yeah.
became this whole weird dynamic where it just like kept continuing and then she finally like found out at one point so then like I was in trouble but I had to confess it and then it was going to be fine and then the very next day she was like organizing a threesome. It was so confusing. Like it was
Yeah.
like either you were it was all about power and control and like who was in charge. um yeah, so
Do
it be
you
so
know, I need to ask, I was going to save this question for later, but I have to ask it now because I'm just so, do you know how much of the two of them, like, when did they start planning this? Do you know anything about, like, how extensively they planned or when they decided they were going to do this together?
I am so curious about that because I remember asking him, like, have you done this with anyone else? Like, I literally asked him that at one time, and I remember him saying, like, oh, well, there was attempts, or like we tried, basically like they had tried to have threesomes with somebody else, but like it had never worked out. And so I wonder if, like, honestly, within like a few weeks of me coming to the church, or once they found out about like who I was, or the fact that I was a vulnerable person, that they like honed in on me. And I think the fact that my best friend had a boyfriend, they didn't go after her because she like so they ended up kind of pushing my best friend and her husband to get married. They did their wedding
Wow.
and they like pushed them to have a kid kind of quickly and she got pregnant right away. And they were, I mean, I don't even want to necessarily tell their story, but they weren't abused sexually by them, but in basically every other way. And that's like it is part of it, but it's hard to like tell both stories. But yes, they were still involved and they were had their own form of abuse from them.
Do you think they were abusing the kids at the daycare and stuff, or
Mm-hmm.
were they?
So I definitely, so like for instance, they had a child who was a neighbor that they were kind of friends with the parents or actually grandparents were the caretakers, and they had given him permission to spank this child. Now they had permission, I get that. He wasn't like bruising him, but it was not a good situation.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of very borderline things that were happening. And I remember one time a parent came home and said that their child said to them, and this was like a 2-year-old, could barely speak, said that Mr. So and so pee pee, Mr. So and so pee pee, like kept saying he. I never witnessed that, so I don't know, but I would not be surprised
Yeah.
because other things came to light later. But
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. So basically I'm now living in the apartment. I lived in that apartment. I think it was my second year lease was about to come up for renewal. And at this point, I was almost living at their house. I was either doing church stuff, daycare stuff. I was there all the time. And so it was like they kept planting these seeds. They started naming my apartment the storage unit. Oh, are you going to your storage unit? Because I was hardly ever there. And they kept saying, like, oh, like, I don't know why you're paying for a storage unit. They were like hinting at me living with them. And they kept hinting at it, but they never like quite outright said it because they wanted me to say it. And I somehow picked up on this and realized, okay, if I don't say something, they're eventually going to say it. And so I was like, do you guys just want me to come live here? And they were like, oh, that has to be your idea. We didn't say it. That has to come from you. Da, da, da. But I knew like I was always there. They like basically would never like barely let me go home unless it was to get new clothes. And so I ended up moving in with them. And they framed it of like you don't have to get up as early to open daycare. You're here all the time anyway. You'll be closer to the men and women of God. And his whole thing was like, "Oh, this will make the sex stuff stop because you live here now." And his mom lived in the building. His mom lived with them too.
Okay. Does she have any idea of all this?
There's no way she didn't. There's no way she didn't. You
Wow.
cannot convince me. She lived in the house with them.
Do you think is one of them manipulating the other, or are they both equally like
So, in my
doing that?
opinion, he got to her literally in high school at 15 years old and has been grooming her since high school, and she's still loyal to him.
Okay,
That is
that makes
my
more
very
sense.
clear.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, yep. So, they were also framing it of like, oh, well, then the sex stuff will basically slow down or stop because you live here now. And it was all about being blessed and protected by the men and women of God and like there's so much religious stuff that was a part of all of this. So I move in with them. I no longer have the apartment. Now I'm living with them. And from day one, they part of the lease that they had me sign was that I was not allowed to have any visitors. And I remember my parents were like, that is a red flag. And they were very concerned about the fact and they were like, well, no, we have a daycare. We can't just have people coming in and out. We have other people's children here. So they made it make so much sense. Oh, and on the weekends, we're preparing for church service. It's nothing personal. You can FaceTime your family. They were like, oh, let's make a whole video for your family of your new room and your bathroom. Like they were all about like making it seem normal, but it was not. And so I could not have my family over. I could not have visitors. And that's where I was now living. And so then it just, again, it was almost like every month, like another little thing got like changed, whether it's like, oh, like who do you have on your Facebook? Show me your friends list. Like, who are these people? Are they good? Are they like, so then it was like removing people off my Facebook. That, and it wasn't like delete your Facebook. It was very, very gradual. Like, who are these people? Are they good for you? Are they aligned with, the word? Are they people of faith? All this lingo. Because I will say language was huge. The language was so interesting because everyone sounded the same and you had to sound the same and you had to use the right language. Um, yeah, so basically every month like something new was being changed. And so then it was time for me to start teaching piano again because I always took the summer off for my students. And so they started saying like long story short, they convinced me to close down my whole piano business because I was needed for God, basically, to be their personal assistant and to help with daycare. And, you know, I was driving to my piano students because they were homeschoolers. And they were like, but the way they framed it was tell all your students they're now required to come to you. And they knew that would result in all of them saying, sorry, the reason we have you is because you come to us.
Yeah.
So they inadvertently, like, created this whole narrative of, like, this makes the most sense. You're standing up for yourself and your business and you're expanding your business and people are going to come to you. No one was able to come to me. It's the whole reason they were hired me.
Yeah.
And so then it was like, oh, well, teaching piano is like a thing of the past. So, before you move from your apartment, like he came over with a sledgehammer and literally destroyed my piano with a sledgehammer. Like had me do it.
Because it's a thing of the past?
Yes, because now it's a new chapter and this is like a thing of the past. And it was like
Were you upset?
destroying. I was definitely upset, but I did pretended I wasn't upset because
Oh,
this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what the man of God is saying, so you have to do it. So like even telling you this story right now, it's so fascinating because like 5 years ago, if I was telling you this, I would be like so upset and I would be like crying. But I don't even feel upset telling you because it's been so much time past. It literally feels like a different person. It's so crazy. It's so trippy.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it was very intense. I was literally forced to sledgehammer my piano. Like it was
Wow.
crazy. Yeah. hmm So it was like a very systemic like isolation, forcing us to me to trust them, the abuse piece, and then slowly destroying anything that was like a part of who I was, basically from my past before Word of Faith.
Yeah.
So and and then it was also so fascinating because in the beginning they were, oh, it's fine to wear pants. They would take me shopping. She like taught me how to do my makeup. I wasn't allowed to wear makeup. They taught me all this stuff, and then 3 years in, it was like a light switched. I wasn't allowed to wear makeup. I had to wear baggy, loose clothes. It was just so fascinating how everything changed. Um, hmm So now I'm living with them. I'm doing the daycare. My best friend has a baby, and they just had me stop doing piano. So then the piece of the story that's just that is I won't get into crazy detail is the fact that they became godparents to my best friend's baby, and they would watch the baby while my best friend and her husband went on dates, etc. And this baby also went to the daycare. And so they came up with this reason that they needed to take care of this baby for 10 days while my best friend and her husband had a break from the baby. And so they took care of this baby for those 10 days. And this is so eye-opening as well. I think it was the second day, this little baby who was a literal infant, I think he was 10 months old, he had just learned how to pull himself up and stand up. So the husband, he would put his fingers in front of him and called it doing ups, and the little boy would grab his fingers and pull himself up. Apparently, on like the second or third day, he held his fingers out in front of him and said to do ups. And the little baby was like, didn't want to do it. That translated to him saying, this baby has a rebellious spirit. He's not obeying the man of God. He has a spirit of rebellion that has to be like beat out of him. And so he started literally physically abusing this baby till he was like covered in bruises. And so, and the crazy part is that is so hard to like for someone who doesn't understand all of this is when his parents finally saw the bruising and a lot more that happened when they got the baby back in 10 days. The bruising had subsided a little bit, but they still saw some of the bruises, but they were also under the same cult mind of myself that like, okay, well, what he's saying must be true. And his whole thing was like, oh, babies get bruises all the time. Your baby could fall and bump its head and get a bruise. You don't know how these bruises came about. So like and so long story short, what ended up happening with the baby, and that's why it's so like important to the story, is the fact that the baby went to its checkup, his 1 year checkup. So that was like a few months later, and they measured the baby's head, and it was so much bigger than it should have been that DCF came and took the baby and like child services. And I
Why does the
remember,
baby's head get bigger?
so come to find out, they took the baby straight to the hospital because that's a sign of a brain bleed. And so the baby had such a bad subdermal hematoma, which is a brain bleed, that he had to have surgery and have a little shunt put in as a baby. And so the baby got taken. And I remember being so thankful that the baby got taken because I'm like that I didn't know like what to do in the situation. So at this point, the baby got taken, and so then their daycare got closed down as a result of all that, which again, thank God the daycare got closed down. And so now it was on me to go find a job. So they had me go find a job and I was working two jobs. So I was working full time at a florist shop inside a grocery store, and then I would work 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. loading tractor trailers with trucks at FedEx. And I was only getting like 2.5 or 3 hours of sleep.
Oh my
And so
God.
it was like
And you're
when
still
you,
living with them.
Mhm. And I would be expected to like give him a blowjob when I got home at 3 a.m. He'd be like sitting in the recliner waiting for me. It was so crazy. And it sounds so crazy saying it because it's like, what? But it was, it's just, it's so hard to explain because it didn't happen overnight. You know what I
It's just
mean? It was
stuff
like
happens in
this.
life. No, I understand. Yeah.
So now I'm sleep deprivation. Like when you research how people get brainwashed or in these situations, it's like literally it is like a textbook case of like love bombing, the languaging, the religious piece, the sex piece, the control, the isolation from my family, the all of that. So now the daycare's closed. I'm working like crazy. I'm the only one working because they are the men and women of God. They have to prepare for services. So they're not even working. They're just home. And I go out every day and I'm working. And so all the bills are on me. And I'm it was just so crazy. So at that point, then all of us got interviewed by the police about this because like it was a daycare. It was, and the pastor sat down with us and told us exactly what to say to the police the night before. They were like, they're going to ask you this, they're going to ask you that. And they told, like, literally coached us of what and how to say and how to answer the police, which was not truthful answers. And all of us went along with what they said, including the parents of this baby. Like, that is how deep in this cult we all were. And so we all answered those questions and everything. So at that point, I didn't mention this, but the husband and wife of the baby, they had actually moved into their finished basement. So they were also living in the house at this time. And I was upstairs. So the wife, kudos to her, we are still best friends to this day. She is fucking amazing. She left basically to save her son because DCF told her it would look better if you guys moved out. But her husband was like, no, he was so loyal to the pastors, he stayed. So she left all by herself and figured it out and got her son back. And that's like a whole nother story. But she left. And so now it's just me and this other person living in the basement. I'm upstairs, he's downstairs. And both of us are working to pay for the bills of this house.
And this, in some way, is not even entirely unfamiliar to you because you grew up taking care of everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So there
Yes.
is this sort of continuation of, like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was familiar in that sense. And so at this point, their next step is to say that I am so amazing and I am like a daughter to them to such a degree that they want to adopt me as an adult so that we have the same last name. And he tells me, "Oh, that'll definitely make the sex stop because I'm now going to be his daughter for real."
This is such a weird thing. He keeps using like these.
Because I kept telling him I didn't want it to happen. And yet he would keep forcing me to do it. And so then he would try to like sell me on these ideas of why, like, oh, well, this will help it stop.
Okay. Man.
So now we like go through probate court and we go through this whole process, and I am legally adopted as an adult. I was 24,
Wow.
legally adopted as an adult. And
I
I had
didn't
to
know
like,
you could be legally adopted as an adult. I
I had
guess.
to write a whole letter and tell the judge how my own family was not supportive, how I haven't spoken to them in a couple years,
And
and
you
how,
hadn't by then? You were not
mm-mm,
speaking. Okay.
no, because
Oh
they
my
had
goodness.
complete, mm-hmm. So I legally was adopted as an adult. So now I'm their daughter. It's so fucking crazy. And we would go to these mega church events, and they had like weaseled their way in to, it sounds so ridiculous saying this, but like high levels in this organization. So like we would get into back rooms and VIP like settings. It sounds crazy, but it is what it is. And that was the situation that we were in. And so at this point, I'm working, best friends moved out. I don't even talk to her anymore because she's ostracized. I'm completely
Oh,
isolated at this point. I don't have a car anymore. They drive me to and from work. At this point, I'm working I finally had stopped working at FedEx. I was in so much pain every day. I could barely walk when I woke up in the mornings because my right foot had plantar fasciitis from standing for so long, and it was so painful. I had like I honestly can't believe I was not more sick when I got out of this situation. But anyways, I finally stopped doing FedEx and I was only working in the grocery store. And they would come and they would like follow me around on my shift to like make sure I wasn't making friends with people or like talking too much. And every day I had to like report every move I had made and who I had to give a play by play of the day. And so I was working there and I started to really realize this is never going to get any better. I was like, this is horrible. This is so bad. And honestly, being at that job again helped because I would see other people and I would see other dynamics. And I kind of started talking to I didn't talk to people about my situation, but just like talk to people in general.
Yeah.
And I was so exhausted. I would go upstairs to the break room on my breaks and I would literally have a 15-minute break and I would lay down on this little bench that they had in the break room and I would fall sound asleep for 13 minutes. I would set a timer. I was so exhausted. Like people were like, "Are you okay?" And I was not okay, obviously. And so somehow I held down this job and I was getting promoted. So I was now a manager of the seafood department in this grocery store.
You're so amazing. You're getting promoted in this position, even when you're like in this whole entire situation. Of course you
hmm
are. Okay.
So now I'm managing a seafood department. I'm learning all this all this like business stuff and like numbers and profit and loss and ordering and all these things. And so then I went to this is a very pivotal part of the story. I went to a conference with them. I forget what state it was in. And we met. It was not, I think it was maybe my first time meeting them. The pastor, Jerry Savelle is his name, the pastor, one of those mega church pastors that had technically ordained the people that were pastors to me. And they had briefed me of what to say. They were like, okay, well, we're going to introduce you to him. You're our daughter. Like they would bring me and like show me off at these events. Now that mind you, not the only reason I mention this is he is African American. She is white. There's no way I'm white for people listening. There's no way that I look like I'm their daughter.
Yeah.
I look like a younger, hotter version of his wife. Like
Okay.
there's no way I'm their actual daughter. So they basically coached me of like, okay, well, when we introduce you to Papa Savelle or whatever they called him as their spiritual father, like this is what you say. So I had like rehearsed what I was supposed to say. So I go to meet him and and so they were like, oh, this is our daughter. We, our adopted daughter. And so he took my hand. And this is this like church guy, old guy, and he took my hand and he's like, it's so nice to meet you. And he goes, don't ever give up on restoration with your biological family. And I remember I was like, that is so far from the messaging that they had told me. Like they were like, your parents are gonna like they tried to convince me to take out a life insurance policy on my parents because they were like, God is gonna kill your parents because your parents don't respect us.
Oh, jeez.
Like they were the farthest from saying have restoration with your biological family. So the fact that someone above them in this whole hierarchy of all this shit that I had been taught and brainwashed, I was like, wait a second, he's saying something vastly different to me than what they're saying. And so that was like a huge like moment for me of like, okay, wait a second, what's going on? And that did not leave me. So like less than like 2 weeks later, I was at work at the grocery store, and this lady from the evangelical church, so she's known me since I was maybe 12, right? I see her in the store and she saw me and I tried to like ignore her and kind of like pretend I didn't see her. And she was like, hi, I pray for you every day. I'm so glad to see you. And I was like, hi, like fuck out of here. I can't talk to anyone. Like, so I like just kept doing my own thing. And then I was like, no, fuck this. Like, I want to know, did she really mean that? So I went and found her. I'm looking in the aisles and I found her. Also, I will pause real quick to say, at this point as a seafood manager, I was in training to become the assistant store manager. So on this particular shift, was a training shift. So I was all over the store, whereas normally I would have just been behind the counter. But on this particular day, I was out and about. And so I go and look for her, and I see her, and I'm like, so I go up to her. I'm sure I was like semi-aggressive. I'm like, Tammy, you said you pray for me every day. What exactly are you praying? And she was like, what she said was, she goes, oh, I pray for you to have restoration with your family. And it was the same words that the other guy had said like 2 weeks ago. And I was like, oh, really? It like really, really hit me because I was like, oh shit, okay. And so at that point, it was a very like and things were just like the abuse was just continuing to get worse and worse and worse like at the house, and it was just and when I would try to say no, whether it be to him or even to the two of them, like one time I said no, I didn't want to have a threesome or whatever, basically I got screamed at for like 4 hours that I'm a goody two shoes and I think I'm better than them and I'm this and that. And so anytime I tried to assert myself, it was so much worse than just going along with it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I had gone along with it for so long, because if I tried to not, it was horrible. And so I kept telling myself or thinking that it would get better. So like for instance, like the adoption, I thought maybe it would stop. It didn't stop. I thought like each of these things I thought was going to get better or be a turning point, and it never was.
Yeah.
And so finally realizing like all those chain of events and then the pastor and then her, it just all I was like, okay, this is crazy. I was like, I think I need to leave. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? Like, I'm with him 24 hours a day. We all slept in the same room at this point. At this point, we were all living and sleeping in the same room on air mattresses. I forgot to say it because they ran out of money. So I helped them sell everything in their whole house on Craigslist. We made like over $20,000. They had like a huge house. So I had helped them sell everything. And we were living in the basement now from where everyone else had moved out on air mattresses.
How is this
So
guy making money?
he wasn't at this point. So when I first met them, he was working as a football coach for a juvenile prison, and he was making like 6 to 8 grand a month.
Oh,
And she
okay.
was making like 5 to 6, maybe even 10 grand a month on the daycare. So they were making a lot of money
Okay.
when I
One
first met
point.
them. So that's the other thing. At one point they were making, I mean, they took me to get my motorcycle license. They took me on motorcycles. I know how to drive a motorcycle. I have a boating license. Bizarre. Like I have my shooting license. I helped him get an AT. It's just the things he's done is so random. My fiance's like, "What haven't you done?" I'm like, "Babe, I don't know." So, anyways, I did all these experiences, and that was part of the grooming in the beginning. Like they had all the money, they had all these things I had never
Yeah.
done, and they showed me all of that. But then it was like once they realized they could get me to do all of that and they could stop working, his contract ended with the state and the daycare got shut down. They basically were like, well, God is showing us that we need to focus on our messages and threesomes with our daughter. Like, what? So, yeah, so now I'm realizing, like, okay, and now mind you, at this point, I did have an iPhone, but I was on their phone plan, and Facebook app was off my phone, but I still had my Facebook account. And so if I went through my Safari app, I could still get to it. And so I was like, you know what? Let me go to my Safari app and see if I can message the husband of my best friend that used to live in the basement that had since moved out, right? And he was actually I actually knew him first. He was a very good childhood friend. When I say childhood friend, it's from when I was 15, 16, 17 doing the child Bible clubs. So that's like my earliest friend, you know? So he was in that group of people. And so I knew him before he even had married my best friend. And I was like, let me message him because he's local. And because I had caught wind that she had moved back to Pennsylvania with her family. Otherwise, I may have messaged her. But I caught wind through, I don't know how, that she had moved. So I messaged him on Facebook and said, like, hey, I think, and it's so interesting. I know I have messages somewhere because I saved it for my book. It's so fascinating how I even wrote to him. I said something like, I think God is telling me I need to leave. What do you think? Or I don't know how I phrased it. It was so interesting. Like I was still using God as a framework of why I was doing what I was doing because it was so ingrained. And so I messaged him and he wrote right back and he was like, oh my gosh, I'm literally like shaking. I never thought I would hear from you again. You have to leave. Like, how can I help you? Da da da. And so it was like I made this decision, like I have to get out of here, but I didn't know how to safely do that because the mind you, this person physically is also very big person physically, never mind the mental control. And so I was like, there's no way I can tell them I'm leaving and I'm always with them. And so I'm like, how do I escape? Like how like they're always there. And so their dating anniversary was like 6 days away and they mentioned, oh, we're gonna go bowling. And so I told my friend, I said, I think they're gonna go out this night. If they do, can you pick me up? And so and mind you, this was the first time they had left me at home, and I could not tell you how long. And so I started making a plan of like what I was going to do because I'm like, what am I going to take with me? And I didn't want anything from them. So I didn't care about my clothes or my shoes. Like, so I didn't, even though I had a lot of that there, I didn't want any of it. And so I made a whole plan of how I was going to do it. And they like the amount of lack of sleep and what they would have me do, they would have me clean the whole house on my days off. And their house is a I want to say over 3,000 square foot house. Is a big house, maybe even four. It's a very large home. Yeah, very very nice, very new, huge house. And I was responsible to clean it from top to bottom. The checklist was 10 pages long.
What?
Hmm. It was a 10-page Excel document checklist. She would initial every single thing, and it would take me like 10 hours to do. And I had to do this every 2 weeks. And so I was responsible to clean the house. So they're sleeping in till like 12 noon, and I'm, oh, you better get up at 6 a.m. and start cleaning. Like the lack of sleep they kept me on was very intentional because when you are on that lack of sleep, you also can't think clearly,
Yeah.
combined with everything else. And so I'm cleaning the house and I had the wherewithal to be like, you know what? I'm like blown away of everything I thought of because I knew that my laptop that had photos of the little baby that had been abused on it was on my computer, and there were other things on that computer that had technically been bought through the ministry, even though it was with my money, and I didn't want them coming after me for shit. And so I had the wherewithal to plug up a external hard drive, back up my whole computer while I was cleaning the house, and then delete everything off the whole computer so they wouldn't have this other stuff. And so I was waiting for my computer to like back up for a long time, and thank God it finally did. And
So
I
you
deleted
were
the whole
thinking like,
computer.
I need evidence.
I was like, I need this information because I knew that I had lied to the police the first time. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is crazy. I need to get what's on my computer off and delete this. And
Wow.
so I got everything off the computer, and they went, it was later that night. It took them forever to leave. They finally went to go bowling at like 8 p.m. And so I think I may have even called my friend at that point and said they just left, like, can you come? And so I literally took two black trash bags, and all I did was took clothes I needed for work and like tampons. I even use tampons now, but that's like all I took with me. I left everything. Jewelry, I didn't care. I didn't even take the phone because again, the phone was under the ministry and I didn't want them coming after me for shit. So all I had was two black trash bags and clothes that I could use for work. And I didn't have a phone. I didn't, and mind you, I didn't explain this part. Every 2 weeks when I got paid, they took all my money and I had no savings. And they had racked up credit cards in my name. So I had no credit because I had all these credit cards. Again, when I first
You
met them,
had
they were
debt, technically.
from them, things I
Yeah.
hadn't even bought. But when I first met them, they were rolling in money. So when they asked, oh, can we use this for points for flying? It'll help your credit score grow. In the beginning, the first year, it did. I didn't care. Sure, you can use this. You pay me back. So they, again, there's so many layers to this shit. It's crazy. So I had like 25, $30,000 worth of debt for things I hadn't even purchased to the point where like, you know how banks will cover bounced checks?
Yeah.
Okay, so he knew my bank would cover up to $800 of a bounce check. So he had me write him a check for 750 whatever dollars, even though he knew I didn't have that money. And he cashed it. He got the money, and then my bank account was negative. I couldn't even open a bank account because in the check system, which is where they'll like flag you, so I had overdrawn bank account. Like it was insane. Like my financial situation, the way I was getting paid from my job was to like a debit card.
Oh my
So
God.
some people that can't open bank accounts, whether they're immigrants or whether they're for different reasons, they can still work, they still have a work visa, etc. They get paid on this debit card. So every 2 weeks, I would take that card take all my money out and give it all to him. So I literally had no money, even though I had been working this whole time. So my friend came and it was like 10 p.m. at night. And I remember standing there about to leave, saying to, and this is how deep the control went. They had told me that I had to call this Dunkin' Donuts receipt and do a survey so they could get a free dozen of donuts. And I remember saying, oh my gosh, I need to do this before I leave. And then I was like, Danielle, what is wrong with you? And I was like, this is insane. And I didn't do it, but there was literally a part of me that was like, wait, I need to do this. That is how like
Wow.
programmed I was. And so I deleted my whole phone, like reset to factory settings so that they couldn't like find anything on my phone. I didn't really have anything, but and so I
Wait,
left
remind me,
everything.
where'd the stuff go from the computer?
So on a flash drive that I brought with me,
Okay, okay,
but I left the physical computer.
okay.
So then my friend took me to his apartment 2 towns over. Mind you, he was still working overnights at FedEx. So he had to go work overnight. So now I am left in his apartment by myself with no phone, just like sobbing on the floor, terrified they're going to find me
Oh my
because
God.
I'm like, what if they find out where he moved to and they come and like try to get me? And I didn't have a phone. I just had to like wait the whole night until he came back. And then the next morning, he helped me get a phone. I didn't have a car, and I had another training shift of being a manager for an entire grocery store, like a Whole Foods, like a manager of a Whole Foods. So I'm like, I'm going to work. You need to drop me off. So I pull up to work. He drops me off, and I see their car. So they're already there waiting for me. So I go in the office to the manager. I'm like, oh, I forgot to say I did go to the police first, just to say that I didn't want these people contacting me and I wanted them to know. I didn't go into any details. I just said I don't want people contacting me. So I had a business card from the police. So I slide the business card to my boss. I was just at the police station. I'm fine. I was like, but you might have noticed those two people that follow me around my job. And he's like, yeah, I've seen them. You know, he's trying to like be professional. And I was like, well, I used to live with them, but I moved out yesterday and I have a feeling they're here trying to track me down. So I just want to give you a heads up. If they're bothering me, I'm going to call the police. And he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I was not okay. He's like, I don't think you should work today. And I was like, I'm fine. And he's like, no, no, I really don't think you should work because so they sent me home. They paid me. It's honestly so funny, but that job truly like saved my life because it was a great job. And I got promoted to the assistant store manager running the whole store like 2 weeks later. And I was like, you need to put my proper last name on my frame on the wall.
Oh my
So I
God.
got promoted like less than 2 weeks later to the assistant store manager of the whole store, was not a small job, and yet I like that enabled me to like get back on my feet because I got paid. It was a good paid job. Um,
They didn't keep showing up?
so what happened was they showed up like two more times. But I mean, the people in the store were so nice, and my other coworkers, only like a couple of them knew, but they were on high alert of like if these people show up. And not for nothing, it's easy to spot them. Like he's a big dude. Yeah, like you know what I mean? And so they were very aware if they saw them come in, and the police had made it clear to them like the store is aware of you guys. Of course, we can't prevent you from shopping there, but you cannot harass her at work. And he also called me at work because I was on the cusp of that promotion. So he knew my work schedule for the next week and a half, and I was terrified about that because I'm like, they know when I'm gonna be here. And so he did call me at the seafood department one time and tried to talk to me, and I was like, I was so shocked. I was like, and he was crying, oh, we love you so much, like you can come back, and you need to come back, and da da da. And I was just like, I need to work. Like I was so frozen and like shocked. um and that was the last time that I ever like spoke to or heard from them, but they only tried to come in twice and then they stopped. um yeah. So and that store, I mean, it was truly a huge blessing because they had something called a friendship fund that you could pay into out of your check every week in case an employee had a hardship. And I had paid into it because I'm like, that's a cool idea. And so when I explained to them, like, obviously, the nature of what happened, I had to tell them because I didn't know what they were going to try to do to me at work, you know? And so I ended up sharing, like, I have nowhere to live. Is there any way the friendship fund could help me get an apartment? And so it did. They paid the first and last so I could get an apartment. And so I got my own apartment. I didn't have to like go live with my parents and be even more like freaked out. So I got my
Wait,
own
is this a
apartment.
voluntary thing? Like you didn't have to pay into the friendship fund, you just
It's
did?
voluntary.
And you
Yeah,
were
you don't
paying
have to.
into it even though you had no
Yeah,
money.
right.
And then it helped you. Oh my God, I'm gonna
hmm
cry.
I know. It's like you couldn't even make it up. It was, yeah. And so I was able to get an apartment. And then one of my mom's close friends, who her husband is a doctor, they are financially fairly well off or stable or however you want to put that. She offered to help me find a car, and she paid cash for the car, and we wrote a promissory note together, and I paid her back for the whole car. Have my title of my car. And so I was so grateful and blessed because there was no way I could, my credit was fucked. I ended up filing bankruptcy because even though 30,000 may not sound like a lot to someone, in my situation it was. And like it was so overwhelming to try to
To
pay
most
all that
people, it would
back.
be a lot, right? And does it still keep going up? Because you
Crazily,
keep
the
getting interest,
interest.
right? Even if
Yes,
you're not even
yes.
spending more, it just
I
keeps.
couldn't even open a bank account. I couldn't do anything. Like, I remember when I could finally open a bank account. It was literally not until last year that my bank account finally approved me for a bank account with no fees. And my bankruptcy falls off in 2027. So there's still like it's crazy. So, yeah.
Wow. So you start finding your own feet. You have a car, you have an
Mhm.
apartment.
Mhm.
And then what happens? What do you do?
Yeah.
Do you reconnect with
So
your family?
I did, yes. I actually called my godparents first because I was kind of freaked out of calling my parents. I didn't know what their energy or what it would be. And the lady who spoke to me in the store that day, and she offered to have me come over and see my parents like at her house for the first time. So it wouldn't be too stressful or overwhelming to like go to their house or whatever. And my parents were like beyond happy to see me. My mom had like a box of all these cards she had written to me when I was gone and like all these clothes she bought me because I had like nothing. And so I reconnected with my family and I reconnected with my siblings. And I think it was very hard for them to process the fact that I wasn't the one who, I never wanted to stop talking to them.
Yeah.
And so it was hard for them to understand. I think most of them understand now, but I think it was very hard for them to grasp like it wasn't me that was doing this. Even though I told you don't call me anymore,
Yeah.
it was not that I didn't want to talk to you anymore. So it was really hard, like because and it's really still hard in the sense of like that affected, I mean, my younger siblings, I was like their mom. Do you know what I mean? My
Yeah.
youngest sister was 10 years old when I like disappeared. That's a huge trauma for her as well.
Yeah.
So it was very traumatic for my whole family, especially for my two youngest sisters. Um, and it's so tricky because I shouldn't have had to be a parent at 10. I should have been able to move out at 18. And all of those things should have been totally okay. And a lot of, like I said, a lot of the early part of what those pastors were saying was true. I should have been able to have a car and go get a job or those things. And it makes it really confusing, especially for my younger siblings, because like I was gone for 5 years out of their life. Like I missed so much. I missed one of my brother's weddings. I missed a wedding. I missed my siblings, turning 13, turning 16. Like I missed a lot. And that's something that is still very sad to me when I really think about it because I can't do anything about it. But
Did
um
you, how did you get rid of, I'm assuming you got rid of the adoption thing somehow.
so me and my wonderful parents had to go back to probate court and basically reverse it or like they had like my parents had to like adopt me back.
Read. That's just the craziest thing to me. I didn't even know that as an adult that
A
could happen.
can. If they could have changed my social security card number, they would have.
Wow.
Hmm.
Okay, so then
So,
keep going.
so then I was trying to rebuild my life, literally from nothing, and it just goes to every aspect, whether that's what am I gonna wear, what am I gonna like, just everything. I had such little experience, and I'm beyond grateful that I didn't get that. And there's no right or wrong, but I'm just grateful from in my experience that I did not resort to hypersexuality because after abuse, that can be very common.
Yeah.
And even for me, having some type of sense or say over my sexual experience was important to me. And so I did have a few encounters, but nothing bad happened to me. I didn't get in any bad situation or anything. But it was like, I'm trying to navigate that. I'm trying to figure out, I never would have had a job at a grocery store either. Like, I've been an entrepreneur forever. I would never, like, yes, I'm so grateful for that. But I also was like, what the fuck am I doing at a grocery store? Like,
Yeah.
this is not what I even want to do. And so I, it was the most random experience where a hairdresser that I met at work that would always say hi to me, she shared with me about a coach that she was working with. And I was seeing a therapist, but she literally just sat there and was like, she like had nothing helpful to say. She was so shocked of my story. And I'm like, okay, but I need to figure out what to wear to work. Like, you're not helping me. Like, I was feeling so frustrated because she like didn't know what to do with me. And so when this woman mentioned this coach, I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll try that. So I had never worked with a coach. I'd never, etc. And I will say, looking back, there's definitely some things that were not great about that coaching experience, but there was some that were very great and that were very helpful of me realizing I never would have stopped teaching piano if it wasn't for these people.
Yeah.
And so even though my love of piano wasn't really, I don't even think it was genuinely for me, it was more that's what I knew and that's what I could do well.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do something on my own terms and not be stuck at it at this job. And so that coaching experience helped me figure that out, which was great. And so what I ended up doing was I I had the apartment for 1 year. I was the manager for a whole year. So I kind of like went to therapy, got a coach, got my apartment 1 year, had all that going on. And then realized I did not like this work environment. I didn't want to make this into a whole career. And so I decided to kind of take charge of my life in the way I knew how. And so I became a full-time nanny Monday through Friday, and I was taking home more than what I was at the grocery job. So I did that, and then I started teaching piano in the evening. So for a while, I was working a lot, but I did that until I had enough piano students again to where I didn't have to do the daytime. And so what I did was I moved from the apartment to one of my dad's houses. It's actually next door to my childhood home. It was where my grandpa used to live, and I rented from my dad. And in the downstairs, I created a beautiful piano studio with like a couch and a waiting area and little puzzles and games for siblings. And so I rebuilt my piano business in like 7 months, 9 months to like 35 students every week. And I was making like good money doing that. And then amongst this time, I was starting to try exploring dating, but I also truly believed that I would never be with anyone. I was like, there's no way that I can have a healthy relationship, or like the only sexual experiences I've had are this crazy situation or a few one-offs here and there. Like, I was like, there's
Did
no
you
way.
tell your parents this? The sexual stuff?
So not in the very beginning. I think about 2 years after I had been out of the situation, I did.
Okay.
So, and then amongst all of that, part of working with that coach as well is finally, it took like 2 years after me escaping to like regroup to like what had happened with the baby. And it sounds crazy to say this, but like in that 5 year span, what happened with the baby was like year three. So these 2 years of trauma after that baby were so intense that it took time for my brain to even like go back to that,
Yeah.
even though that was also so horrific. And so my coach was the first person I spoke to about it, and he encouraged me to go to the police because he's like, they will understand the situation if you explain it to them. And so I went to the police, and I knew that I had lied to the police the first time. And I was like, I would rather, because I played it out in my mind. I was like, I would literally rather go to jail if I have to go to jail for lying than live with the fact that I didn't speak up about it as soon as I could.
Yeah.
And so I called them. I met with the detective. She recorded my whole conversation. I explained everything. And I said in my statement, like, I would rather, if I have to get in trouble for this, that's fine. I could not live with myself of not explaining the truth of what happened in the situation. And so that turned into an almost 6 year process of when I stepped forward and spoke about it to her researching everything, finally getting the warrants, etc., him getting arrested, news articles coming out, all that type of stuff. And as a result of me coming forward and those news articles, a young man who was now, I believe, 20 years old, he saw the news article. He lives in Virginia now, which is not even in Connecticut. He saw the news article somehow all the way down there, and that the pastor had abused him as a young boy at an after school thing that he did. And he had stayed at the pastor's house for an 8 day period. It's almost eerie how similar it is what happened with the infant and what happened with this boy, even though this boy was 8 years old. And he had been literally afraid for his life, so he had moved to Virginia to live with his grandma. And now, him seeing this news article and being older, he was brave enough to come forward. And he called the detective and told her his story. And so he was arrested again on charges for this young man. So now
How
he
old
was,
is the boy? How old was the boy when he called the detective?
I want to say maybe 18.
Okay.
You know what I mean? A couple years
Yeah.
ago. I could be mixing it up, but around that. And so he was arrested twice, but he paid bail and said not guilty. And mind you, this was all around like COVID, so everything got super delayed. So he was out and free and doing who knows what, but he had these two cases pending for years. And so meanwhile, I'm trying to just live my life and trying to heal and trying to get the help that I need and move forward, etc. So in the meantime, I met someone who this was in, so I ran away in 2016. I met this person in the fall of 2017, so maybe a year after I had left. And I was so guarded. I would not give my number to anyone. I would not talk to anyone. I always swore I would never talk to someone from the gym. And he came up to me at the gym and asked me for my number. And I was like, I don't give my number out. I was like, but I'll think about it. And I had seen him, and he was cute. He was handsome. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll think about it. So I go up to him. And I said, okay, well, I don't give my number out, but I'll give you my Facebook. And what's your Facebook? So this was, I sound so old. I'm dating myself, but this is how I would vet people. Because when I worked at the grocery store, I got hit on a lot too, and I would get hit on by married men, and I'd find out on Facebook. So I'm like trying to find him. I can't find him. So I'm like, do you even have a Facebook? And he's like, no, if you don't let me help you find it now, you're not going to find it at home. Like, here, let me help you find it. So he finally finds it. And his page has like a cartoon character as the profile picture, not that many friends. I'm like, this is probably a fake page. So I was very annoyed about the whole situation, but he seemed so nice. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll message him. So we exchanged a few messages. That was very difficult, still traumatized, you know. And I asked him a question that he didn't answer immediately. Come to find out, he was afraid that I was a private investigator, and he works as a correctional officer, and so he had been followed home by an ex-inmate and attacked, and he was on suspension from his job while they were figuring out what had happened, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. So he
Oh.
was paranoid himself, like, oh shit, like, why is she asking me a million questions? But I was also paranoid. So he answered a question the way I wanted him to, and I was like, well, I'm sorry. If you can't answer a simple question, I'm not interested in talking to you. And so I ignored him for 8 months. And yet I would see him almost every day at the gym. And I was like, he's like talking to other girls. He seems like he has a nice vibe. I was like, maybe I'll talk to him. Meanwhile, I'm not dating anyone else, right? And so finally he kind of broached me again, or like smiled, or like said nice to see you. He tried to like break the ice because I had just been like so stone cold. And so I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll message him on Facebook. And this is what I said to myself. I'm going to ask him if he wants to see the new Avengers movie. If he says no, it's not meant to be. And I'm never speaking to him again. I'm so dramatic. Mind you, Demetra, it's 4 p.m. The movie is at 7. And I'm like, hey, we haven't even spoken. But I felt like the ball was in my court. I'm like, hey, do you want to go see the Avengers movie? And he shockingly said yes. And there's less than 3 hours notice. And I was like, oh, okay. So we get there. It's sold out. It's sold out. And so which a movie is a horrible first date, anyways. But it's sold out, so we had to wait for like the 8 o'clock showing or 8:30. So we sat down and we talked for an hour and a half. And he was so nice, and he told me his situation. That he was like, if I seemed weird, this is why I'm kind of going through a situation with my job. And I was like, oh well, I just got a crazy situation too. I didn't tell him my whole story, but I was like,
your mom.
so basically, I was like, well, listen, I'm not looking for a relationship. Like, I'm not looking for anything, so don't get excited. Like, I was very like, I am not looking for anything serious. And he was like, well, I got out of a fairly long relationship not that long ago. I'm also not looking for something super serious. I'm just looking to meet new people and, just basically date around. And again, I had grown up with no dating experience. So, long story short, I was like, well, we can be friends with benefits then. Because I wanted to have some type of sexual experience on my own terms.
Uh-huh.
And he was just dating around, so he's like, okay, well, we can have fun. So we had a few dates first, and then we, did our thing. And after quite a few months, we really got to know each other really well. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm actually starting to have feelings for you. Let me cut this off. And looking back, I'm so grateful that he could have taken advantage of me so much in that situation because I was still so fresh out of that. If he had like tried to convince me to do something, I
Yeah.
probably would have. I don't think I was quite like out of everything enough
Yeah.
to, even though I was pretty hardball, I still was coming out of everything.
Yeah.
And so he really became a really good friend. And so then all the way through COVID time, and we were never exclusive, but I started to be like, you know what? I'm ready for something more serious. Like, fuck this. And so we stopped talking for quite some time. And it was COVID hit, and he reached out to me to be like, hey, hope you're okay. And at this point, I was much further along in my process with myself. I was just really focused and knew what I wanted. And so we started hanging out and did nothing physical for 6 months. We would literally just talk for hours at my house when he would get off work. And it was COVID, nothing else to do. It was the crazy time.
Yeah.
And so then I made like a joke about how like he has a whole roster of women and I'm not interested in, I like made some joke that he took really personally. And then he stopped talking to me. And I was like, fuck this. COVID happened. And by the way, I took my whole piano studio online, virtual for COVID. And
What?
so, and I retained all my business. And then I was like, fuck it. I'm moving to Austin, Texas because I can do my business online. And so I moved to Austin, Texas, didn't even tell him. And he found out through social media and was like, where did she go? And so then we started talking even more long distance. And so we developed a really strong friendship completely, without any physical aspect for a long time, for like a year. And then he came to visit me a few times. And long story short, I moved back up this way and we're now engaged. So that is how I met the love of my life.
Oh my God.
I know, it's so crazy. But that was like 8 years ago, which is crazy how time is. Like, that was about 8 years ago that I first met him. And we just took I mean, we both were in unique situations. He was dealing with a work situation, I was coming out of something, and we both just ended up going our separate ways. I did my thing, and then it just created a really solid foundation, especially long distance for us. Like that really just like solidified how we both were like, wow, our people are not here. I've gone on dates here, you've gone on dates here, nothing feels right, but we both feel like our conversation is so matched in our energy, and we took a slow path. So I came up to see him for 2 weeks and then basically never left.
Yeah.
And then he came to Austin and helped me move back to live with him. And so I've been living with him since 2021. And we just really took our time, like it moved slow, did, some couples therapy together just to kind of make sure like, all right, do we feel solid? Do we feel like and we have just a very, very solid relationship. And I'm so beyond grateful because I never thought I would have that. I never thought I would find someone that would be compatible or be able to Because also, I understand I've been through a lot, especially early years. I would have major triggers. I don't have them really so much now,
Yeah.
but to have someone who, we weren't exclusive from day one, but to have someone who could see the potential of who I am and what I bring to a relationship and not just be like, all right, this girl has crazy baggage, fuck her. Like, I could understand someone feeling overwhelmed, even hearing my story of like, okay, what would that mean for me? He has never held it against me or judged me for it or referenced it or put it in my face. Like, he's amazing.
He probably thinks it's incredible.
He's very proud of me.
Yeah.
Hmm. So,
I never knew the whole
how we
backstory of
met.
the two of you like that. Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay, so you ended up going, well, there's two things I want to know. Let's do the court thing first. So you ended up
Hmm.
going to court. Tell us
Yes, I
that.
forgot that piece in sharing about the love of my life. So basically, when I came back to Connecticut and I was living with him, um, that was when I got word that like the trial was coming up. So what had happened was there was a whole bunch of court dates. I didn't go to any of them, but there was a whole bunch of court dates, and he was pushing it to a trial. And a trial, I mean, I'm assuming most people from media or TV know what that means, but it meant that I had to go and testify in court in person, and he was going to be there in front of a jury. And so I was trying to mentally prepare for this because I'm like, okay, I knew it was going to be incredibly intense. And I also knew that even though I technically wasn't, oh, I maybe a little context real quick. When I went forward to the police, I explained everything about the sexual abuse to me as well. And I explained about what happened to the baby. However, with the laws in Connecticut, since I wasn't a minor when the abuse happened, and by the time I had the courage to come forward, it was too long.
Yeah.
So there was nothing they could do about what had happened to me personally. It was only referring to the little boy. So,
Even with the money stuff, like all that other, because there must have been
so,
illegal things there.
so the thing is with that makes it so tricky is that I said, sure, you could use my credit card, but
Right.
then it's this blurred line
Yeah.
where, and even the detective was like, there needs to be better laws around manipulation and coercion and
Yeah.
really
We
looking
don't
at the
really
whole
have
picture of
that. Yeah.
situations. Yes. So there was nothing that could really be done for that part of it.
Okay.
So I really, was getting ready for this court thing, and I'm so grateful that even though it was a very long, like 6 years waiting for it to be over, I am so glad it happened in the time that it did versus like right when I had come forward because I was in such a different place of being able to testify. And so I was researching like what to wear to court and like all these things. So I wore this. So first of all, I had to testify for 3 days. I was on the stand for 3 days, and I was questioned by his defense attorney. And so I decided when this started, I was like, this is not a fashion show. I am wearing the same outfit every single day. I don't care how many days I have to go there. I'll wash it every night. And I got rid of the outfit after, and I'm like, I'm wearing the same fucking outfit. It was a navy blue shirt and navy pants and navy shoes, and it was the most simple outfit. And I knew from all my work in coaching, which I didn't touch on that, but I knew from all my work in coaching how to answer questions and how to listen and how to really hear what this defense attorney is asking me.
Yeah.
And I did incredible. I did not get shaken on the stand not once from this guy. And I was on the stand for 3 days. It was so intense. And I refused to look at him, the person who abused me, not even one time. And when they asked me to identify him, to ask me what he was wearing, I just scanned my head and I looked at the ceiling above him and I could see with my peripheral vision and I said, I see a blue shirt. I did not even look at him. I refused to look at him for 3 days. And I had to look at his attorney right next to him, but I not once. I was like, I'm not giving him an ounce of my attention or my energy. And I fucking crushed it. So I had to testify, and what was so fascinating is that the defense attorney would say things like, "Oh, here's a picture." They tried to paint a picture in court, that I was trying to look like her and steal him from her. Mind you, they were dressing me like a doll. They picked my clothes. They picked my hairstyle. She literally dressed me. And so they're in court showing me a picture saying, so you're dressed just like her, aren't you? And they try to say these questions to make you just have to agree. I never agreed with their questions. I said, she dressed me that day. So he would say things like, she da da da, didn't she? And instead of me saying yes or no, I would state the truth.
Yeah.
So all I did was just said, she dressed me that day. Your hair is done just like hers, isn't it? She curled my hair that day. I was like, so I was not getting like on this trail because they just try to get you on this trail of saying yes, yes, yes.
Mhm.
And so they had a stack of thank you notes that I had written to them, and they made me read every single one on the
Oh my
stand.
God.
And so I'm sitting here reading these thank you notes, and they say things like, Dear mom and dad, because that's what I called them, thank you for letting me ride my bike today. I was a 23-year-old woman. First of all, the fact that they had me read these letters was retarded on their part because it literally proves everything I've like
Wow.
tried to explain. These letters are explaining how they controlled everything about my life. And so I had to read this whole stack of letters, but it just proved what I was saying. And they showed a picture of me holding up a fish, smiling. I look like, if I sent you the picture, you would not recognize me. I look like a different person. It's crazy. I look horrible. And he goes, "Oh, well, you're smiling in this picture, aren't you?" And I said, "My teeth are showing."
Man.
And you know what was so crazy is the young boy that this jury didn't know about. It was two separate juries for the young boy and for my trial. Do you know what I'm saying? So it was two separate juries. They had a picture of the little young boy, the 8-year-old, holding up a fish that they used in that boy's trial too. Isn't that crazy?
That's weird. Wait,
So they
so
had
your
these
child was
patterns.
testifying for the boy?
There was two boys. Remember the other boy that stepped forward?
Yeah, that one.
Okay, so mine was for my best friend's baby.
Oh,
And the
okay.
other boy is the one who moved away and saw
Right.
the news article and stepped forward. So there
Okay.
were
So
two
they were
separate
still able.
trials.
Okay, okay, okay.
So I'm just saying it was crazy that I happened to know, oh, this is so oddly similar, even though the jury didn't know. But I'm sorry, I know it's confusing.
No, no, I
But
got it.
basically, yeah.
Weird.
So there's just such a pattern of their abuse and like what they do, whether it's an 8-year-old, an infant, me, like it's just like these weird patterns of abuse and manipulation and control. And it started with the religion and the love bombing and the weird sex shit, and then it just like every possible way of abuse that could happen, of financial, emotional, mental, physical. It's just so crazy. But I testified for those 3 days, and he was found guilty on all counts. And which like the jury could see and believe the truth, which was like it was a lot of mental work for me of like, okay, I have to not be attached to how this ends up.
Yeah.
I just have to know I did what I could do. But I'm glad that he was found guilty because he definitely is.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but
did
it
he
was
go
a
to
very
prison? What was his sentencing?
it's for 10 years, so he is in prison right now.
Wow. And nothing happened to her, I guess. Is she
So
just
nothing happened to her, and supposedly since I left, that they had two children, and it honestly just I can't imagine those two kids because yeah, there's no way he's not abusing them too. But at
um
least he's gone for 10 years. It's so I mean it's very hard, and what's very tricky too is the fact that like I am very curious like what happened to him to make him this way. And
mhm.
I have like a I don't believe that any I believe all of us have like good and evil within us, and we all have there's a reason why he's like this. And so I don't like he's obviously not a good person, and he has hurt a lot of people. But I it's very someone asked me like, why didn't you go after the wife? And I'm like, well, first of all, I didn't really go after anyone. I came forward and spoke the truth of what happened. And yes, it is a little confusing of why she wouldn't be considered an accomplice, but at the same time, I think, like I said to you before, she is like another one of his victims, to be
Hmm.
honest, but just a longer one. And sometimes I've had dreams of like seeing her or speaking to her, like while he's in prison, and I've never run into her. And I still and I live in the same state now, you know,
Yeah.
but I've never seen her, and I don't know if that would ever happen, but I think she's so loyal to him and so brainwashed that she would never leave. And
Mm.
yeah,
Maybe with him gone, though, you never know.
for enough time.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah,
How did you heal?
so a lot of things. I think me really taking my power back and finding what my power is of like my own intuition and my own voice and my own choices, and working with different modalities has definitely helped. And I've kind of at this point, so when I left, I kind of went on this like spiritual, like journey, which can also be very culty, but I'm grateful I didn't get like sucked into anything else. Like after this, I didn't get sucked into anything else, like thank God. So but how did I heal? I think through writing, through movement, through therapy, um, some plant medicine. I didn't go on a crazy plant medicine venture like some people do, and in the sense that I did do people can that's a whole other topic too.
Ah,
Yeah, so I
yeah, it
didn't
is.
I have family members that in my opinion have overused it, and it's I feel like it's a very delicate thing that when used correctly can be very, very impactful in the right setting. And so I have worked some with psilocybin. I did do ayahuasca in Peru on a retreat with amazing shamans, but I don't and that was actually very impactful in that I did that experience and I could see all of these beings like working on my brain. It was so interesting. And they were like rewiring things from what had happened, like from all of this stuff. And it was very interesting seeing that. And I could also see like these white beings. It kind of reminded me of when I saw angels when I was a kid, but it was a little different. But I didn't feel pulled of like, oh my God, I need to go do this again. Like it was just kind of like a one-time experience. Um, but anyways, all of those factors combined with, I think, time and continuously, like each day, really the self-awareness of what am I doing and why, and not allowing my past to dictate my present has helped so much. And I don't really identify with the language currently of like, oh, I'm on a healing journey. And the reason I've kind of let that language go is because I felt like it was holding me back almost of identifying with or believing subconsciously that like I'm somehow broken or
Yeah.
messed up or that I still need fixing or healing. And I'm like, okay, well, no, I'm complete, I'm whole, like, and not in a delusional way because we're always evolving. But I felt like that language was no longer helpful for me
Yeah.
of like I'm on a healing journey. I understand the sentiment, but it doesn't resonate for me anymore.
I think
Um,
too, we can get really caught up in like the focusing on pain and all the stuff we've been through, right? I've been thinking so much about this. It's really
mhm.
not useful at a certain point. It
No,
just brings like more pain and then you spend more time in like all the suffering.
right. And that is, I see people who look, I almost, I don't know where I came up with this analogy. I don't recall if I heard it somewhere, but it reminds me of driving. When I'm driving in my car, I have this huge windshield in front of me, and I have a rear view mirror, and it's this big. It's so small. And if I'm staring in that rear view mirror, I'm gonna fucking crash. If all I do is look behind me while I'm driving forward, I'm gonna crash. It's there for me to glance
Yeah.
and get a reference or make sure, oh shit, like I don't know, my $30,000 of debt is creeping up on me and it's going to rear end me. Or, oh, like, it's there for a reason, but people get so stuck in the past. And that is something that, yeah, even doing this interview or podcast with you, I thought a lot about doing it because I'm like, I really don't even resonate with this story. It's not like my thing. It's not what I identify with. However, I do think it is very important for people to share their stories and to share them without shame, to speak truth.
Yeah.
And I think it is very important. So it's this fine line that I felt really excited to speak with you and share with you. And thank you again for having me. Because I think it is important that people can also hear someone who has been through something so crazy and has come out of it and is completely living a completely different healed life now.
Yeah.
And like I have an amazing partner, been with for years. We have an amazing relationship, and my experience touches a lot of categories, and I think it could resonate with a lot of people. And I also don't buy into the idea that I'm like so special and unique. There's a lot of crazy shit out there. Like, I mean, yes, the nuances of my story are a little crazy. I get it. Not, homeschooled, church, and all the things. But I'm not the only one. And so I
No.
think it's important to speak our stories without shame.
I
And
think
that's
it's so common, actually. Not like, your unique experience, but just
hmm
I'm I've been kind of shocked at just like how many people I happen to know with intense cult stories. Like I'm not seeking them out. It's like I just like
like
we didn't first meet because you knew I had been in a cult.
no,
Like
right.
it's just like I've just happened to
hmm
come across these people. I'm like, why do I know so many people? It's like there are a lot of them, a lot of them. And I think it's amazing to and important to be able to show that you can just move on and like like you said, put it behind you, really. It's
Yeah.
there, it has its own impact,
hmm
but like you can move forward.
hmm
Um yeah, I felt that same kind of thing in my own much smaller way of just
hmm
like even when starting to write and do podcasts and like talk about cult stuff for a bit, I was like, no, I'm so like I feel so removed now that I almost don't want. For a little I was like, I don't even want to talk about it. I just want to move on with my life. I don't even want to have
hmm
anything to do with it. And now
hmm
I think I've sort of found this way where it like meshes in, like it just informs a lot of, and I'm very curious about it. Like all these stories now, I feel like
hmm
I've had enough of my own experience to have an understanding of how that happens. And like I know what it felt like for me, again in a much smaller way, but like to have been manipulated into acting ways that I look back on and just am like, how did I
Appalled.
become that? Like, how did I do that? How could
hmm
that be? And I know that it wasn't. And I think it's so crazy that that is the case.
Yeah, one of my first strong feelings, and part of how you asked me how did I heal, etc., and I mentioned writing, I wrote an entire memoir of this whole story. And one of my reasons for writing that was because I wanted people to be able to not only hear the story, but to kind of get an understanding of how does this happen? Because it is hard to explain quickly, especially if you have no grasp. And so that's also part of why I wanted to even share with you on this today, because I still do feel that it can be educational and helpful for people who are open-minded to listen instead of just like, oh my God, that's crazy, but not actually like think like through how that happens. And sometimes I'm like, is my book gonna like train people how to brainwash people? But I'm like, no, I don't need to go there. It's just like educational. But um yeah, so I wrote this whole book, this whole memoir, and then I paused from publishing it, and I thought a lot about, did I want to publish it? Did I not? And I thought it was so interesting because 2 weeks before you asked me to be on this podcast, I have been doing some part-time hospice care privately and it's actually been so, it's another whole story, but basically I was with this amazing woman who was in the end of her life, and her family was the sweetest family. And long story short, her daughter-in-law came to visit from out of state. She ended up chatting with me, sharing with me that she wrote a memoir. So we got to chatting. I didn't even mention my book. I just listened to her whole story. We had a great chat. And the next day I was there again, and the woman was still hanging on, her mother-in-law. And so we had nothing to do but chat. And I was like, fuck it, I'll tell her about my book. So I told her about my story. She was like so obsessed to hear my story. And she's like, oh my God, she was so excited to hear my story. And then she's like, you have to publish this book. Now, this is not the first time someone's told me this, but something about it, like the way she was saying it, just really stuck with me. She's like, you have to tell your story. And mind you, I've been like on the fence about it or whatever. So the next day, and this woman in hospice, this beautiful lady, had been holding on, and her whole thing was like, why is she holding on? We've told her it's okay to go. I had done things with her to also help. Like, it was just, why is she holding on? So the daughter-in-law texts me the next day, and she goes, I hope you don't mind, but I have a big mouth, and I told my whole family your story, and we all agree that Mimi was hanging on so I could meet you, and you need to publish your book. And the woman passed away like 2 hours later after
Oh
she
my
texted me
God.
this, and I was like, and then you emailed me like less than 2 weeks later, and I was like, okay, okay.
I
So
do
I
think
had to
there's
tell
a
you
way
that.
these things, I understand the like not wanting it to define you and your life
Mm-hmm.
not being about it. And at the same time, there is that, right? It is like, it is an incredible story
Mm-hmm.
and one that will resonate with so many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm still sitting with like a pen name for my book. If it's like a past part of me that I'm kind of like naming this chapter a different name in the sense of that memoir, or if I will, what I'll do with it. So I'm still to be determined.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
tricky one.
Yeah, because it's not something that I think about every day, or like you said, it's not my identity. There are so many intricate, amazing facets of who I am now and what me and my fiance are creating and what we're doing that is like, I don't, this isn't what I want to be like known for or my legacy about. At least that's how I feel now,
Yeah.
and who knows, like I may feel differently in a year or two. Like I'm open to my thoughts changing on it, but it is something that I'm sitting with and seeing. And I still need to finish writing about the trial because I also wanted to publish the book after it was kind of not complete, but
A
so
nice
yeah,
ending in that way. Can you tell us more about what's happening now, or if you
sure.
want? I
Yeah.
feel like people might want like a kind of ending
Like
to the
what's
story.
happened
Yeah.
now. I know. Yeah. So basically, me and my fiance, we have been working on creating a life for ourselves. Neither of us, came from money or maybe the best financial education. And so we've been working together on not only our own, finances, things that we've come from, but we worked on a house together for 4 years, 3.5 years. And it was just really neat because, he was able to, like, I would never be able to qualify for a house because of my unique situation until a few years from now, right?
Mhm.
And yet he was able to. So it's like we complement each other where he was able to purchase this and then he didn't know what to do with it because it needed so much work. And I'm like, I know what to do with this. And so, we just joined forces in that regard and took on this house project. And so long story short, it has evolved to basically being an incredibly successful house flip. And so we are now figuring out what is next for us as far as, because we both have had different ideas of doing real estate investing, but we're not quite sure what it may unfold to. It may actually unfold into something totally different. So right now we have, gone through completing this house process, flipping the house successfully. We are closing in April, so fingers crossed for a smooth process. But we both have really just been on even though I don't resonate with so much of that healing journey lingo moving forward, but we've both been on a journey of sorts for each other and now together really being joined. So we're going to get married this summer and very excited. We're not doing a wedding, meaning like a big wedding. It's just us. We're doing something very small, and we're going to, we really value our time and our marriage is very serious to us, and it's not like a show for other people. So we're going to do something really small and special and take a special trip. And so we are hoping to have kids if that's in the cards for us. And we'll see if it's not, that's okay. We're not sure, but if it's meant to be, we trust that it will happen in the right time. But we wanted to get this house sold first and have a more stable living situation.
Are you
So,
really handy? Is that why you were able to
yes,
do the house stuff?
yes.
Why you just know how to do everything?
Well, this house that I grew up in, that I'm in right now, growing up, and that's the other piece of things, it needed a lot of work, and we all learned how to do stuff when we were little. So I'm very handy. Like I mean, you name it. I've tiled floors, I've redone bathrooms, I have like built things. Yes. Yes.
Wow.
So it's been a lot of work, but also a lot of fun. And I do, it's so funny when people say like, what do I do? It's like, I don't even know how to answer that. I just am. Like, I am a homemaker. I'm a cook. I love working out. I go to the gym 4 times a week usually. I go outside all the time. I don't know how, somehow it works. I'm here. I have a few coaching clients, but that's not my main thing right now. It's really more our life that we're building together. And yeah,
How old are you
so
now?
I am 35. I'll be 36 on Saturday.
Oh, happy birthday. This will come out
Thank you.
well after your birthday, but
Yeah, so
everyone will know.
36. Yeah. So that's what we're doing now is really just joining forces and merging and I mean honestly I tell my fiance this, our relationship, I'm so proud of our relationship just for us. Like we don't
Yeah.
even share our relationship online. It's a very sacred thing to us, but what we see out in the world and people our age that are still trying to find people, just I'm so incredibly grateful for him because we have such great communication. We have, we've really grown together. We didn't show up like how we are now, but we both were willing to like work on things together. And I think that's really special because I think a lot of people nowadays are looking for someone to just be ready and know them and be
Yeah.
set just like this microwave relationship. And it's not real.
Yeah, you
So I'm
grow
very
together.
grateful. Yes. So that is very special to me and I'm really am grateful. So yeah.
Uh, Final thing I want to know is spiritually, where have you ended up?
So I knew you would ask me this. I'm like, I don't
I'm
even know
just
how to
curious.
answer that.
You don't have
So
to have a
no,
perfect
I
answer. I'm
yeah.
just curious with your background.
Yeah.
Like,
So it's very interesting because I definitely believe and feel spiritually that there is a higher power, God, where we come from. And these are things that I think about, and even Brian and I will talk about a lot about all this just nobody really knows like 100%. And that's the trippy thing. Like no one truly knows. And yet there are so many things that we both have either experienced, well, I'll speak for myself, that I've experienced. And even throughout this, like I know it was not God causing what happened to me. I know God was not abusing me. I know, you know, life happens. It's an evil world. There's bad people. Shit happen. Like I get all that. And if anything, I feel that even as I was telling you the story, there were so many things that I do not believe were coincidences at all. Like if anything, I feel like God was trying to help me. So I did not leave this experience even when I ran away like hating God. I never was hating God, and I still don't. I haven't, I think because of all of I've struggled with the languaging around it, meaning I've struggled with like praying to God or Jesus. I've struggled with some of that because so much of it was so weird. You know what I mean? And so all that to say, I still like, I mean, I think I was mentioning how we like prayed over our house and we we both of us have, and sometimes I'm like, okay, like I don't know how to describe exactly what I'm praying to. I'm like, universe, God, like whatever creation energy comes from a woman, a man, I don't fucking know. Like I do feel a connection to a spiritual source. I just don't have the best words for it sometimes. I feel like I try to not make it complicated. It's like, okay, God, but sometimes that also can feel weird. So it's something that I would like to even kind of have a little more clarity on, but I've just kind of let it be of like, okay, I feel very connected to myself, to my body, to nature, to my partner, and we do have a strong, I feel like, spiritual foundation in our relationship and how we are in the world. So it's still like a question. And even when we talk about having kids, I'm like, what would we teach them? Or what, would we take them to church for community? Or would like, because I think some of the biggest parts about like church is even just the community,
Yeah.
that people are looking for community, people are looking for music, people are looking for these experiences that come with church, but then it can become super controlling and messed up. And so, how do you balance all that? So, anyways, that's kind of the best way I could articulate it.
Yeah.
It's not the
You
most
know,
clear.
it makes me think of, I think it's just really sad how most cults, they use these really powerful aspects of ourselves and they corrupt them. So, like our spirituality, our sexuality, these things like, and so then when you leave, these things that are so powerful, your relationship with them gets broken, or it often does.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't have that to connect to anymore.
Right.
And that's so sad. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I'm grateful, kind of what I was saying about like I'm glad that I didn't get sucked into another cult or into like hypersexuality as a way to cope with what happened to me. I'm grateful that wasn't my experience, and I have a lot of compassion for people that is what happens because I understand it. But I'm grateful that it also didn't cause me to like hate God and turn off that spiritual part of myself because I've always been very intuitive and very in tune spiritually. So, I never used it as a, I don't know if excuse is the right word, or reason to be like, I hate God. Like, yeah, I'm not like triggered by Jesus, or, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not like, don't talk about that. Like, it's not that I'm like over here, like, oh my God, I can't wait to go to a church. I even like went to a church a few times when I left out of curiosity, just see what it felt like. But I just didn't feel like at the need or that I wanted to. So I've never, I don't go to church, you know what I mean? Like, and so, but I do think about like if we are meant to have kids and we do have them, what that may or may not look like. But I don't have to have it figured out right quite yet.
no. Oh my
So,
God. Do you have anything else you want to say or touch on that we haven't
mm,
gotten to?
I think the only thing that comes to mind when you say that is just about if you've been through an experience, a cult experience, and you're trying to figure out like, oh, but some of this was good, or oh, but I learned this, like, and you're trying to decipher that. I just want to say I understand how confusing that can be, and just encourage you to not feel like you're wrong if you keep something that you learned from there. Because if it's true, it's true. It's okay if you learned it in a bad situation because every cult is going to have some truth. Otherwise, people wouldn't be in it.
Mhm.
So I just want to highlight that.
For me, I found that I had to throw it all out completely for a time
Hmm.
in order to distinguish for myself what actually I believed was true. And now
Mm-hmm.
I've found it's only really now that I've started to even use some of the same words again, because for a while I even threw
Mm-hmm.
out all the same language, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
she doesn't own the language, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like, but but it was
Yes.
coded for me in such a way. And so
Right.
now it's like, now that it's not coded and I feel like I'm really removed,
Mm-hmm.
but it takes time no matter what way you go about
Yes.
doing it. It's like
Yes.
it does just, I think people sometimes don't realize how long it can take to really undo that kind of thing. And when you're out, you want to just be like healed and out, and it just doesn't work that
Just
way.
unfortunately, I know. Yeah. I wish it was a quick healing, or a quick process, whatever you want to call that, because I also would like to say that it does get better. Like I left almost 10 years ago, or 9 years ago, and it does get better. I mean, I never thought it would get better. Like it was so bad when I first left, but like I do not have the same triggers anymore. I don't have, there was times where I almost got into car accidents because I thought I saw their car and I would have such a visceral traumatic PTSD
Yeah.
response. So those things they go away. So it does take time, so that might not be fun to hear, but it does get better. Mhm.
Thank you so much for coming on. I feel just your story is such a gift to be
Thank you
able
for
to
having
hear.
me and listening. I have not shared the story in years in this manner. So, or honestly ever, because I don't think I've shared the story like post trial
Hmm.
in like a verbal form. Like I may have written things here and there, but so this was a first for me too. So we got to experience that together.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening and having me.